Chapter 106. Everyone said that prostitutes were heartless and actors were unrighteous. But in the eyes of the third prince, it was not that there was no such thing. It was just that the dark life since childhood made them unable to believe it. This was very easy to understand. No matter who was sold by their parents or abducted by human traffickers when they were young, it was difficult to believe that there were still any good people in this world. That's good. Sister Di fiercely clenched her silver teeth. Since her thoughts had already been exposed, there was no point in continuing to pretend. Then I will agree to this matter. The third prince has done us sisters a great favor. Although we sisters have nothing to repay him, Chun Feng Lu will do our best to let the third prince get the beauty. The green-clothed woman bowed to the third prince again and spoke very seriously. Seeing this, the third prince hurriedly stood up from his seat and bowed to Sister Di. Then I will have to trouble you, sister. The third prince said, if this matter is successful, I will not forget sister's kindness. Sister Di covered her face and smiled charmingly. She looked at the third prince with her charming eyes. She leaned over the counter and gently patted the third prince's shoulder. How would you know about sister's kindness? Why don't I let you see sister's kindness before you marry me? The third prince suddenly choked. Ziying and Spring Peach could not help but chuckle. After the matter was settled, the three sisters teased the third prince for a while and then left unsatisfied. In the end, it was just words, and they could only say it. The three sisters had just walked to the door when they saw Zhao Qi rushing over. They saluted and called out, "Seventh Master Zhao." "Oh, hello, three sisters." Zhao Qi also saluted and said very politely, "May I ask if my young master is in the umbrella shop?" "Yes," Ziying said. "Thank you, big sister Ziying. Forgive me for taking my leave. I have an urgent matter to discuss with young master, so I'll take my leave first." Zhao Qi said. "Seventh master, please," Ziying said softly. "Well, see you later." Zhao Qi hurriedly walked past the three girls and entered the umbrella shop. Spring Peach and Sister Di looked at Ziying's blushing face with interest. However, he didn't say anything. If a prostitute was truly moved, then this job would be over. "Young master." As soon as Zhao Qi entered the room, he saw the third prince lying back on the recliner and reading the book. "Yo, Zhao Qi, you're back." The third prince was very happy to see Zhao Qi back. "Where have you been these days?" Replying to young master, "I went back to the sect these days." Zhao Qi said, All right. The third prince got up and took out a small chair from the back room and placed it beside Zhao Qi. "Sit down and talk. There's no one else in this room. It's just the two of us. Don't do anything useless." "Okay." Zhao Qi agreed and simply sat down. "Come, drink some water. Don't worry, speak slowly." The third prince poured a cup of tea on the table and handed it to Zhao Qi. Zhao Qi took it with one hand, but the other hand took out a folded piece of paper and handed it to the third prince. "This is—" The third prince took the paper and unfolded it. It was only the size of a palm. The word "one" was written on the paper. "The family teacher asked me to give this to the third prince." Zhao Qi took a sip of tea and said, What kind of tea is this? It's not bad." "What does he mean?" The third prince said, "This word seems to have a hidden meaning." "What hidden meaning?" Zhao Qi laughed. "This is not a word. This is a sword that the family teacher gave you." "Sword?" The third young master's heart skipped a beat. He flipped the piece of paper in his hand over and over, looking at it from front to back. But he couldn't tell which part of the word on the paper looked like a sword. The family teacher said that when one reaches his level, the sword will naturally be integrated into one. He can fuse the sword into the pen and ink. That's why he left a sword on the paper and gave it to the third prince to protect himself. Zhao Qi said. But when he said this, a thin layer of mist seemed to flow through his eyes. Behind the mist, one could faintly see countless flying swords whistling through the air like meteors. Is it necessary?" The third prince patted Zhao Qi. "I'm so envious. Although I can't reach it, I yearn for it." Zhao Qi glanced at the third prince. "The family teacher is the best swordsman in the world. How can I not yearn for it? No. Do you think this old guy is kidding me?" The third prince looked at the light paper in his hand. he still felt uncertain. Can this piece of paper withstand the sword saint's sword? Ah, he casually drew a line on the paper and told me that it was a sword? Even if that old guy is fooling me, this is too careless. How can you slander the sword saint like this? Zhao Qi's eyes flashed with a trace of frightening anger. In this world, only you would dare to slander my teacher like this. Who told him to ignore me? The third prince said. Fine, I don't care about the matter between you and the family teacher. I can't care. Zhao Qi sighed helplessly. But the family teacher told me to tell you something. This sword is not to be used unless it is absolutely necessary. The more you say it, the more it sounds like you're toying with me. The third prince said disdainfully. What? Are you afraid that if I use it, it won't work and the old guy will lose face? The family teacher said that this sword's power is unparalleled. Those below the 9th level will die, without a doubt. Those below the 9th level will either die or be crippled. He hopes that the third prince will be careful and not hurt the innocent. Zhao Qi said very seriously. He didn't want his teacher's sword to fall into the hands of the third prince and cause him to do anything wrong. The third prince shook his head indifferently. It was obvious that he didn't take Zhao Qi's words to heart. He just casually put the paper in his hands into his clothes. It seemed that if Zhao Qi wasn't by his side, he would have thrown it away. The third prince's casual attitude made Zhao Qi unable to suppress the evil fire in his heart. He really wanted to punch the third prince's beautiful face, beat him until he was purple and red. But because of various reasons, Zhao Qi couldn't do it. He could only endure it. But today, Zhao Qi's luck seemed to be especially good. A burst of powerful footsteps came from the street. In the blink of an eye, groups of soldiers stood in front of the umbrella shop. Each of them stood ramrod straight. It was obvious that they were well-trained. This lineup made the third prince and Zhao Qi confused. They weren't afraid of the danger. After all, the third prince was a member of the imperial family. No matter what, no one in the capital would lead the imperial army and openly kill the third prince on the streets. Zhao Qi thought so, but the third prince didn't seem to think so. The third prince looked at the army outside the door. His eyes turned. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. His hand trembled. With a clang, the teacup fell onto the counter. The tea spilled, and what a large area. Zhao Qi looked at the third prince in confusion. Even the sword saint didn't get much respect from you. Even when your emperor wanted to control you, you still dared to break through the door. What kind of person could frighten you to this extent? The third prince didn't even look at the teacup that he usually rubbed. He stood up, lifted the curtain, and walked into the back room. But not long after, the third prince came back with his head lowered. The back door was already guarded by soldiers. The third prince went out and came back. There was one more person in the room. She wore a fitted white warrior's uniform. Her hair was still in a simple ponytail. She stood in the middle of the room as if there was no one else around. She looked around aimlessly. When the third prince saw this person, his eyes narrowed. The third prince ran to Marshal Qin's side and said fawningly, "This morning, I heard the chirping of magpies disturbing my sleep. I was wondering what was going on. I didn't expect Sister Lan to come." "There are no magpies in the capital," Marshal Qin said with a smile. "Is that so?" The third prince looked at Marshal Qin's smile and felt a chill down his spine. He thought to himself that he was going to be in trouble today. Then, this morning, it must have been my heaven's perception. Stop bullshitting. Marshal Qin reached out and grabbed the clothes in front of the third prince's chest. Don't hit me. Let's talk nicely." The third prince waved his hands in front of his face. Seeing this, Zhao Qi stood up. Qinlan looked at Zhao Qi. "Your sword saint's last disciple, Zhao Qi?" "That's right," Zhao Qi replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "You've been accompanying the third prince to indulge in debauchery for the past few years." Marshal Qin's voice was filled with killing intent. "Yes. Then what are you doing? You want me to guide Lord Sword Saint's disciple?" "No." Zhao Qi's reply was straightforward, without the slightest hesitation. "Then why are you standing up?" Marshal Qin was overbearing. "The family teacher once mentioned to me that when the marshal was young, the family teacher had personally taught the marshal for 3 years. He told me to treat the marshal as a disciple when I see him." Zhao Qi said and bowed to Qinlan. Greetings, senior sister. Good boy. Qinlan immediately beamed with joy, changing from her overbearing and cold expression. Hello, junior brother. Qinlan could not be considered as the Sword Saint's disciple in the truest sense. She was not the Sword Saint's disciple in name, but they were in fact master and disciple. Now that Zhao Qi, the last disciple of the Sword Saint, called her senior sister, it meant that the Sword Saint regarded her as a disciple in his heart. How could Qinlan not be happy? Junior brother, you can go out first. Senior sister will talk to the third prince, Qinlan said with a smile. Brother Qi, you can't go. The third prince screamed. Young master, I'm sorry. Zhao Qi frowned and said as if in pain, Sword Mountain's rules state that when disciples are outside, elders are to be respected. Senior sister's orders, I dare not disobey. Young master, please don't blame me. Zhao Qi said and simply walked out. You're talking nonsense. Don't think I don't know the rules of Sword Mountain. The third prince struggled and shouted. Sword Saint said that people of Sword Mountain should follow the rules of the world. How can elders be respected? Come back. Isn't it a little too late to call me Lord Sword Saint now? Zhao Qi's gloomy voice came from outside the door. He seemed to have walked far away. Chapter 107. That, Sister Lan? The third prince saw that Zhao Qi had run away without any sense of loyalty, so he could only speak in a pitiful tone. What are you doing here today? Oh, what are you doing here? Marshal Qin was so angry that she laughed. I've been back in the capital for a few days now. After waiting for so long, the third prince still hasn't come looking for me, so I can only come and look for the third prince personally. When the third prince heard how Qinlan addressed him, he knew that she probably already knew everything about him. Marshal Qin should have already investigated his unrestrained behavior in the capital for the past few years. However, this was also within the third prince's expectations. After all, the military was all about know yourself and know your enemy, and you will be victorious in 100 battles. Information about the enemy was always the most important thing. I've been busy with the opening of a new store for the past 2 days, so I couldn't pay you a visit in time to welcome Marshal Qin. It's my fault, the third prince said. The opening of a new store? Qinlan pushed the third prince out. It seems that the third prince is very attentive. Of course. The third prince staggered back 2 steps. That's a little too fake. Qinlan looked at the third prince with a faint smile and said, You, the third prince, are the princes of the dynasty. Do you lack this little bit of money? To be honest, I'm now self-reliant. Life is very difficult, so I can't afford to be careless. The third prince said, That's good. If that's the case, then I'll take care of your business, so that you won't say that I don't care about our old friendship. Qinlan nodded and casually picked up an umbrella. She glanced at the price tag on it. It's clearly marked with a price tag. The third prince's business is very honest. Sister Lan, you're too kind. Some have it, some don't. The third prince broke out in cold sweat. How much is this one in my hand? Qinlan asked. I'll give it to you. The third prince rolled his eyes and said immediately, Thank you for taking care of me when I was young, Sister Qin. How can I take your money for a mere umbrella? Sure. Qinlan nodded slightly. It seems that the third prince didn't waste all these years in the brothel. You've learned how to speak and do things. Did you learn it from your sisters? No. Third young master stammered. Qinlan, don't talk to me. Let me ask you, as a prince, U.S. right? Is that what I taught you? Sister Lan of Lan of Love. What did you say? Qinlan's eyes widened. If Qinlan's soldiers saw Qinlan's current expression, their legs would tremble and they would take a detour. Could it be that I taught you to visit the brothel? Sister Qin, don't make it sound so bad. The third prince said with a smile. What brothel? It's just some people who have suffered and had no choice but to beg for a meal. As a prince of the empire, how can I stand by and do nothing when I see the people suffering so much? This is what Sister Qin taught me back then, to care for the people of the world. Marshal Qin looked at the eloquent, the third prince, and the hand behind his back cracked. She hadn't seen the third prince for many years. He had indeed grown up, Qinlan had already realized that she probably wouldn't be able to easily convince the third prince. But it didn't matter. This was within her expectations. Arguing with scholars and talking cheerfully and wittily was the specialty of those pedantic civil officials. Marshal Qin naturally didn't think that he would be able to convince someone that those civil officials couldn't even convince after so many years. That was because soldiers naturally spoke with their fists without any warning. Marshal Qin kicked out like a gust of wind, right at the back of the third prince's leg. It was incomparably swift and untraceable. The third prince wasn't prepared for it at all. His body fell to the ground from the sudden kick. It wasn't until the third prince's handsome face came into close contact with the ground that the third prince barely managed to react. He seemed to have been hit by someone. The third prince struggled and wanted to get up, but was mercilessly stepped back down by Marshal Qin's foot. Then, Marshal Qin's fists rained down on the third prince's body. The third prince was stunned by Qinlan's beating. After a while, he let out a series of continuous, blood-curdling screams like a pig being slaughtered. At this moment, the third prince couldn't care less about his royal bearing and handsome appearance. He could only hug himself tightly with both hands. Marshal Qin's personal guard leader immediately stood at the entrance of the umbrella shop, blocking the curious gazes of passers-by. The personal guard leader listened to the third prince's screams in fear. It wasn't until the third prince let out 2 loud screams that he was slightly relieved. The marshal still knew what was going on. With the strength of a peak 9th level marshal, if he couldn't control his strength, even if it was just a little bit, 2 punches would be enough to make the third prince unable to scream again. But even so, he still felt sweat on his back. Even if Qinlan was the marshal of the empire, punching and kicking a prince on the street was still beyond his imagination and acceptable range. This kind of thing couldn't even be described as treason. In the personal guard leader's limited understanding of the empire's laws, offending one's superior and hurting a prince should be considered rebellion. I'll let you stay in the brothel all day long. I'll let you betray the palace. I'll let you be ignorant and incompetent. I'll let you cultivate, but you won't. Qinlan's hands didn't stop, and her mouth didn't stop. Let me ask you, are you going back to the palace or not? I won't. Although third young master was on the verge of tears, his words were still firm. Qinlan was stunned. She didn't think that the delicate and noble the third prince could be so stubborn. Close the door. When the personal guard leader heard the marshal's order, he immediately turned around and closed the door. Who would be able to stand watching their superior beat up a prince of the empire with their own eyes? Moreover, not only did he not stop it, he even helped the marshal guard the door. If he really wanted to talk about it, he could be considered an accomplice. But forget it. This kind of thing was always decided by the marshal. He only needed to follow orders. That's right. The personal guard leader strengthened his conviction and completely gave up on thinking. Liu, Qinlan called out softly. Although her voice was soft, the third prince felt that this soft voice was even heavier than the scolding from before. The third prince had no choice but to prop himself up and sit upright on the ground, listening carefully to what Marshal Qin was about to say. Humans were fickle, and this was reflected in all aspects of their lives. Just changing the way they addressed him could change the tone of the entire conversation. Why don't you return to the palace? Qinlan asked. I want to marry Xueqing, but father won't let me. The third prince said. Really? Qinlan glared, her phoenix eyes glinting coldly. She's just a woman, a maid, and you're a noble prince. Do you understand? I don't understand, the third prince shouted. So what if she's a woman? So what if she's a maid? So what if I'm a prince? Why can't a prince marry a maid? This is something that both parties are willing to do. So why do you let someone else make the decision? What a joke. Because it's not worth it. Qinlan said. As a prince, you have millions of people on your shoulders. How can you lose the big picture for a small matter? You're abandoning your country for a woman? This country isn't mine to begin with. Even without me, the commoners can still live well. Third young master said. Why do you all have to care about me? Marshal Qin crushed a porcelain cup. It had been many years since anyone dared to speak to her like this. If you don't fight for it, you'll die. Qinlan's teacup turned into fine powder, slowly falling from her fingers. And I can't watch you die. So you can't be like this. I have to care about you. I already don't want anything. What else do they have to worry about? The third prince said fiercely, based on your age, you're the most suitable person to inherit the throne. Based on a relationship between you and me. Based on the fact that Sword Saint is your uncle. Qinlan said each word like a knife. No new emperor will be at ease with you. You're different from 16th Prince. Even if he openly rebelled, no one would care about him. As for you, even if you hide in a brothel for the rest of your life, you'll still be able to make your brothers unable to eat or sleep in peace. The third prince fell silent. He knew that Qinlan was telling the truth. He knew it long ago. In the Li dynasty, there were almost always members of the royal family who rebelled in every generation. They used all sorts of methods to rebel and achieved all sorts of outcomes. Poisoning, usurping the throne, leading troops to rebel, forcing the abdication, spreading rumors, fighting within the same family, success, failure, decapitation, death in the womb, death before the start of the war. These family histories that were not known to outsiders were all recorded in the history books that only the royal family could read. However, he didn't know if the ancestors of the Li family wanted to use it as a warning for the future generations, or if they wanted to make it easier for the future generations to use it as a reference. However, even though the third young master had flipped through the complicated history of rebellions, he still couldn't find any ancestor who had a better chance of starting a rebellion than himself. Because, in the history of the empire, there had never been someone like Sword Saint or Guy Mingyue. Most of the ordinary legendary masters were unworldly experts, such as Musin, who wandered around the world all day and was elusive. Like the Pope, although he had a high position and power, he was famous for being a hands-off boss. He had only returned to Xingming City a few times in the past few decades. However, Sword Saint was different. Although he was in Sword Mountain, he was worried about the world. He worked hard for the Middle Empire. He did many good things for the people and gave advice to many officials and generals. The people of the Middle Empire had long regarded Sword Saint as a godlike figure. For a legendary master like him, his influence was too great. If the emperor died today and a new emperor ascended the throne, and Sword Saint suddenly had an idea tomorrow and raised his arm to call for help, then if the emperor wanted change, it might change. As for who it would be, Sword Saint did not have any children. He only had one nephew, the third prince. Coincidentally, it was the third prince. It was perfectly justifiable. Chapter 108. The door of the Li Qi umbrella shop suddenly creaked open. The leader of the bodyguards hurriedly turned around and looked back. What greeted him was his marshal's emotionless face. When he poked his head in to look, he saw the third young master with his head lowered, looking as if he was deep in thought. "What are you looking at?" Qinlan asked as she passed by the bodyguard leader. "No, nothing." The bodyguard leader hurriedly bowed and said. However, when he bent down, he couldn't help but glance sideways at the third young master. It wasn't until he got a good look at the third young master's side profile that he let out a long sigh of relief. He thought to himself that it was fortunate that the Grand Marshal didn't hit his face. What did I tell you when I was in the barracks? Qinlan couldn't help but get angry when she saw her bodyguard leader acting so sneakily. Did you forget what I said when you just arrived in the capital a few days ago? I wouldn't dare, the bodyguard leader said loudly. Then what did I say before we came to the capital? Qinlan asked. The Grand Marshal said that when we arrived in the capital, we should eat and play as we should. However, we shouldn't look at what we shouldn't look at and listen to what we shouldn't listen to. We should listen to the Grand Marshal's orders and act according to his orders, the bodyguard leader said. It's good that you remember. Qinlan snorted coldly. Withdraw the troops and return to the barracks. Yes, return to the barracks. Wait a minute. The third prince rushed out of the room and shouted. Marshal Qin didn't turn around and just stood there steadily. He looked calm and unmoving like a mountain. However, the leader of the bodyguards standing next to the marshal heard the sound of high-grade leather rubbing against metal that made one's teeth ache. He was all too familiar with this sound, as he had been by the marshal's side for many years. This was the sound of the marshal gripping the hilt of his sword tightly. According to his experience, this meant that the marshal really wanted to chop someone up right now. That, the third prince stammered. Marshal Qin, please allow me to carefully consider what you just said. Think about it. Qinlan laughed, but this laugh made all the soldiers of the Western Army feel their blood run cold. Could it be that the third prince still doesn't understand the severity of the situation? I know, but no buts. Qinlan shouted. If you want to, then go ahead. However, third prince, please think quickly. Once the time is right, I won't wait for you. It's never our habit to miss a good opportunity. What opportunity? When the third prince heard Qinlan's words, he seemed to become nervous all of a sudden. What opportunity? Do you know what's going to happen next? The third prince has never been in military. I don't blame you, Qinlan said. I can only say that when it comes to opportunities, I prefer to create them myself. Otherwise, who knows if it's some trick of the enemy. So, you've already started? The third prince said. When? Speed is crucial in war. Once I enter the capital, there's not much I can do. Of course, these preemptive strikes were arranged before I enter the capital. As Qinlan spoke, she began to walk forward with her helmet. Third prince, think quickly. There's no turning back. You'll experience this day sooner or later. Junior, come here, Qinlan called out when she saw Zhao Qi sitting at a roadside tea stall. Ah, Senior, I'm here. Zhao Qi ran to Qinlan's side. Senior, what are your orders? You've played enough with the third prince these past few years. It's time to do something serious, Qinlan said. Understood. Hey, Aisha, don't you think there are too many humans? Jilin stood by the window on the second floor and looked at the humans on the edge of the Lake of Stars. He was a little melancholy. Aisha pursed her lips. She really didn't know what to say. After all, a megalosaurus showing a melancholy expression in front of you was no less strange than a dog grinning at you. It was only now that Aisha had a positive understanding of the strong influence of the Middle Empire. A megalosaurus that viewed humans as ants actually started to feel melancholy after coming to the Middle Empire. If only there were fewer humans. Jilin sighed. What a coincidence. I think so too, Aisha said. Really? You think so too? Jilin looked at Aisha with a happy expression. Of course. Aisha spread her hands. In this world, there are too many stupid and barbaric people. Sometimes, I get a headache from dealing with them. Aisha frowned as she spoke. She patted her forehead painfully as if she was recalling something unbearable. Yo, what are you talking about? Bane walked up from downstairs and asked vaguely. En? What is this? Aisha looked at the thing in Bane's hand and asked. Not only was Aisha curious, but even Jilin couldn't help but look at him a few more times. Ben's left hand was holding a basin filled with colorful things, and his right hand was holding a cucumber that he had already taken a bite out of. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It's a vegetable, Bane said. Of course I know it's a vegetable. Aisha was a little exasperated. She was right when she said that there were too many stupid humans. I mean, where did this come from? Oh, Annie Wong from next door gave it to me, Bane said. She said it's a vegetable she grew at home, but she couldn't eat it herself, so she gave us some. Do you want to? Aisha waved her hand to indicate that it was not necessary. Do humans give their food to others? Jilin was a little confused. It's really a magical race, huh? Really? Bane was confused. He thought to himself, what's there to be surprised about? If humans didn't share their food with others, they wouldn't have lived to this age. This can only mean that the saints' teachings of helping the world have long been imperceptibly influenced in the human body. It's like the spring rain, silently moistening everything. The third young master, who had arrived at some point in time, walked over under Stya's lead. The third prince is right, Stya said. The third prince. Why are you here? Bane said in surprise. Why, you don't look too good. It's okay. Thank you for your concern. I'm very ashamed, the third prince said. Did you get rejected by Xueqing again? Bane guessed when he saw the third prince's embarrassed expression. How long has it been? You're confessing to her again? You didn't even slow down. You're too hasty. No, that's not it. Third young master denied repeatedly. In this aspect, a man couldn't lose his face no matter what. Although the third prince had lost most of his face, he still hoped that he could keep some. Then why? Bane asked, are you sick? Someone beat you up, Aisha said. Right now, Bane believed the words of the other three without a doubt. When he heard Aisha say this, he immediately stared at the third prince with his eyes wide open. Seeing that the third prince didn't deny it, he asked in disbelief, "Who dares to beat you up? Aren't you a prince? Wouldn't your whole family die if they beat you up?" The third prince was speechless. He didn't know how to explain this to others because he hadn't been beaten up since he became an adult. He didn't know what to say, so he could only smile awkwardly and say to Bane, excuse me. Then why are you here?" Jilin said, "You want me to avenge you? That's fine, tell me, who is it?" "Thank you, Brother Long. Don't thank me yet, just give me the gold." Jilin interrupted the three princes and extended his hand to the third prince. "I left in a hurry today, plus the gold is really heavy, so I didn't bring it." "Then you can go back." The third prince really didn't know what to say. In the past, he always heard people say things like the government office is open to the south. Don't come in if you have reason, but no money. The third prince, of course, just smiled and didn't think much of it. He just thought that the rumors in the marketplace were exaggerated. But he didn't expect that the third prince would come to a place that was more government office than a government office. He just said that he didn't have money, and they immediately wanted to chase him away. "Brother Long, I came here today because I have something to ask of you." The third prince bowed to Jilin with his hands clasped. "As long as Brother Long agrees, I will definitely reward you handsomely. It's just beating someone up. You don't have to be like this." Jilin was a little surprised by the third prince's seriousness. "It's not beating someone up." The third prince still clasped his hands and bowed. "Killing someone? That's fine, it's about the same." Jilin was even more unconcerned. To him, beating someone up and not killing them was more troublesome than directly killing them. It's to save someone. The third prince said, "Get out." Jilin wanted to chase the third prince away for the second time. "Brother Long, please help me. I will definitely be eternally grateful." The third prince still bowed and didn't move. Jilin frowned and wanted to ask Aisha to throw this person out. He was a little agitated now, so it wasn't convenient for him to do it himself. He didn't want to accidentally kill him. But Jilin changed his mind and thought about the golden cup he got for free that night in the red light district and the gold brick the third prince gave him. So he changed the content of his words. "The price of saving someone is more expensive than killing someone," Jilin said. After he finished speaking, he thought for a while and added another sentence. "It's 10 times more expensive. How can the price of saving someone be more expensive than killing someone?" The third prince finally straightened his body. "Brother Long, this price is unreasonable. What does your reason have to do with me?" Jilin said, "You have your reason, and I naturally have mine." Jilin thought to himself, "Reason is something that humans set by themselves, not by the heavens. Why should I listen to what humans say? Then dare I ask Brother Long, what is the reason for this? It's none of your business. Brother Long, can you still be reasonable? I'm the one who is reasonable. Who are you scolding?" Chapter 109. "Stop arguing." Staya slammed the table and yelled, "The third prince, please tell us who you want us to save." Staya said, "After all, we know each other. If I can help, I won't just stand by and watch." Staya's words made the third prince's eyes wet. As a prince of the empire, today was probably the darkest day of his life. He was beaten up and chased away. The third prince had never been humiliated like this before. "Thank you for speaking out, Mississippi." The third prince cupped his hands and bowed. He was touched. "To tell you the truth, the person I wanted to ask Brother Long to save is my little brother." "What?" Bane yelled. "Your little brother?" "Yes." The third prince nodded. "Biological?" Bane still couldn't believe it. "Of course." The third prince still nodded. Now, even the righteous and kind Staya frowned and hesitated. As the princess of the Saimai Empire, she clearly knew what it meant for a prince of the empire to be in danger. It meant that many forces of the empire were fighting, and the empire was about to make a big move. It was like a huge and rapid whirlpool. If she wasn't careful, she would be sucked in and dragged to the bottom of the sea. Plus, in Staya's eyes, none of the princes of the Middle Empire were good people. It wasn't wrong for one of them to die. "May I know which prince it is?" Staya asked just in case. "It's my 7th little brother, Li Ying," the third prince said. Staya immediately sneered. If the other prince's deaths were not unjustified, then the seventh prince's death was simply unforgivable. It wasn't worth it to take such a big risk for him. I'll help with this, Jilin suddenly said. Huh? Staya and Aisha were both shocked. Only Bane thought that Jilin had a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. Thank you, Brother Long. The third prince was overjoyed. It's fine, Jilin said. Wait. Aisha glared at Jilin and said, The third prince, it's fine if you want us to save him, but you have to let us know who tried to harm your little brother, right? I don't know. The third prince lowered his head and said, You don't know? Aisha looked at third young master with a playful expression, making him unable to raise his head. As for Jilin, he felt that Aisha's question was unnecessary. To him, everyone was the same. From what I know, ever since the third prince betrayed his family, he has completely retreated from the court. After so many years, he doesn't have any eyes or ears in the court. Am I right? Aisha said. That's right, the third prince said. That's strange, Aisha said. What kind of thing is harming a prince? Once the slightest bit of information is leaked, it would be fatal. Then, the third prince, how did you know about such a secretive thing without any eyes or ears? Or rather, who told you that the seventh prince was in danger and needed help? Don't tell me that it was the people on the streets who told you. If the prince's life and death were known to those people, then there's no need to save him because he's dead. The third prince didn't say anything. You don't know again? Or you can't say it? Aisha said. The third prince nodded. Then we can't do anything about it. Aisha said. We can't help you with this. Please leave. We can help. Jilin suddenly interrupted Aisha. Why can't we help? The third prince, just tell me what your seventh brother looks like, and where he is now. I guarantee that he's safe and sound. You're sick? Aisha looked at Jilin strangely. But just as she said this, Aisha felt that something was wrong, so she added another sentence. You can get sick too? This. Thank you, Brother Long, the third prince said with a trembling voice. The third prince was also very curious about Jilin's change of attitude, but it didn't stop him from putting down a piece of paper and turning to leave. Jilin looked down at the piece of paper left by the third prince. There was a portrait of a person on it. It was the person they needed to save this time, the seventh prince's Li Ying. He looked 60 to 70% similar to the third prince. As expected of brothers, it was easy to recognize. Jilin looked at the portrait, while Aisha looked at Jilin in confusion. What are you looking at? Jilin asked with a smile. You seem to be in a good mood? Aisha said. Jilin was stunned, then nodded, I'm okay. Will you really help the third prince save someone? Aisha asked. You'll do such a thankless thing. Of course I won't do it. Jilin said straightforwardly. Then you're thinking of... Elsa felt a chill run down her spine as she thought of this idea. The seventh prince's Li Ying. Jilin smiled very happily. Let's start with him. What do you want to do? Aisha lowered her voice. Don't you already know what I want to do? Jilin said. Puffed. Aisha crossed her arms and curled her lips. The Dwarf King really tells you everything, the Dwarf King said. When we were chatting, we accidentally talked about it, Jilin said. You two were chatting? Aisha didn't believe it. What's there to talk about between a dragon and a dwarf? Too much. Jilin said in his heart. Let's not talk about chatting. In 2 days, we will unify the beastmen. Well, then how are you going to enter the universe Great Array? Since Jilin had already made it clear, Aisha naturally didn't hide it anymore. Now we all know. If you want to enter the universe Great Array, you need the Imperial Jade Seal. In the Middle Empire, only the Emperor can have the Imperial Jade Seal, Jilin said. So you plan to let the third prince be the Emperor and then let him open the universe Great Array? Aisha said. Yes. Jilin nodded. Then you are so interested in the third prince because of this? Aisha asked. Of course. Jilin said. But the third prince, he seems to be the kind of royal child who doesn't love the country but loves the beauty, Aisha said. If you want this kind of person to be the emperor, it doesn't seem to be easy. Ha ha. Jilin laughed very proudly. If he doesn't love the country but loves the beauty, then if he kills the beauty, he can only love the country, right? You are really witty. Aisha was somewhat shocked. So to say, You are helping the third prince pursue Xueqing. In fact, you are hoping that after the third prince pursues Xueqing, you will find a chance to kill Xueqing and then shift the blame to the current emperor. With your ability in my brain, this matter will certainly be flawless. When the time comes, the third prince will naturally hate the emperor and wholeheartedly want to rebel. You will take advantage of the situation and help the third prince ascend the throne. This is not difficult for you. When the third young master ascends the throne, he will definitely be grateful for your kindness. Although he won't listen to everything you say, it shouldn't be a problem for him to use the Imperial Jade Seal to help you enter the Great Chinquan Array. Ha! Qilin laughed heartily. Now, he had also experienced the feeling of talking to smart people that AI Shah always talked about. It was indeed worry-free and happy. As expected of you, to be able to see through my thoughts with just a few words. In fact, it is not complicated. Aisha said, it's just that I really didn't expect that you would use this kind of method. This is not your style, is it? Ha! Jilin laughed and touched the back of his head. This is indeed not my style. The behavior of humans is always beyond my expectations. Things did not go well. For this kind of conspiracy and intrigue, humans are really better at it. I really can't play with it. So, I want to change to a simpler method. So you didn't go to the Li Qi umbrella shop these days. Aisha said, then what simple method do you want to change to? Ha ha ha. Jilin laughed proudly again. I plan to kill all the princes except for the third prince. When Aisha heard Jilin say this, although it was not unexpected, she was still shocked. She could not help but glance at the portrait that was still on the table. The third prince was kind-hearted and wanted to save his brother, but he did not expect that it was the third prince himself who personally sent his brother to a dead end. The third prince's understanding of heaven's will probably increase by another level in the future. Aisha thought in her heart, you see, this is what it means to be a match made in heaven. My dragon clan is really blessed by the Father God. Jilin saw Aisha glance at the portrait and immediately picked it up from the table and raised it in front of Aisha to show off. Aisha was shocked by Jilin's sudden action and took half a step back. Only then did she say in annoyance, don't give me that. You're talking about third young master and Miss Xueqing as a match made in heaven. How did Staya teach you? Staya, who had sent the third prince off with Bane, happened to come back and asked, what are you talking about? Nothing. Aisha smiled. Are you really going to save them? Staya stared at Jilin and asked seriously. Why don't you trust me? Jilin said exaggeratedly. Didn't you teach me that saving a life is more meritorious than building a 7-floor pagoda? There is no trust between you and me, Staya said very calmly. Also, do you think you care about things like a pagoda? The third prince promised to give me 10 times the gold. Jilin said. Staya didn't say anything. She seemed to have been convinced by this reason. Okay, since we're going to save them, you have to tell me where they are. Jilin said to Staya. He raised his hand, and a red map made of elements appeared on the table. This was a rough map of the entire Middle Empire. When they left the Red Dragon Palace, the Dwarf King had shown it to Jilin before. Staya hesitated for a while and finally walked to the table and pointed at a location on the map. Chapter 110. What is this place? Jilin asked. Are you sure? If the location given by the third prince is correct, then it should be correct, Staya said. This is Guan Mountain. It is said that the Middle Empire had a military training ground here. How can a prince be in danger in a military camp? Who could kill a prince in a military camp near the capital? Bane asked. Let's not talk about who, but the prince might not be safe in a military camp. Aisha said, there's more than one way to kill someone. Poison, curses, sneak attacks, assassinations, mutiny. As long as you want it, there are countless ways to kill someone. It's been many years since anyone has done something like a curse, Staya said. Aisha's expression suddenly darkened. Bane did not know what was going on, but he knew that it was related to the war between the Church of Light and the witches. Okay, Jilin, you should say something too. Bane tried to ease the tension and try to get Jilin's help. Hey, Bane exclaimed in surprise. Stilla and Aisha then turned their heads to look at him in confusion. He finally realized that Qilin, who was originally sitting at the table, had already disappeared without a trace. Guan Mountain was located 630 miles southwest of the capital. At the foot of Guan Mountain was the Imperial Guard camp. It was the training ground for the Imperial Guards. There were 7 training grounds like this around the capital. The Imperial Guard camp was guarded by 5,000 Imperial Guards all year round. If anything happened in the capital, they could arrive in one day. Above Guan Mountain, there were white clouds and the wind was warm. It was a good day that made people feel peaceful. But between the white clouds in the sky, a flame suddenly lit up. The flame burned in the air, but it was fierce. It suddenly reached the height of a person. Jilin waved his hand, and the flame dissipated. But there were still flames burning on his hands, back, and eyes. This was because his spiritual power was unstable due to his fast movement. A distance of over 600 kilometers was merely a short distance to Jilin. Jilin's attention was attracted by the top of the mountain when he arrived. Jilin looked down and saw 2 groups of people fighting fiercely on the top of the mountain. One side was wearing the uniform of the Imperial Guard. They should be the soldiers of the Guan Mountain camp. The other side was wearing black clothes without any insignia. This was the mark of an assassin, but Jilin felt that these people did not look like assassins or killers in the Stai's education to Jilin, as well as the stories that Jilin's father had told Jilin when he was young. Assassins and killers were always lone heroes. There was no such thing as being upright. It was a moonless and windy night. They killed and set fire. They attacked when they least expected it. Their attacks were clean and efficient. If they missed, they would escape thousands of miles away. This was what people like them should do. They were not like this group of people in black. They were mighty and in groups. To think that they would pull out a battle formation and attack the army's camp in broad daylight. What's more, they were equipped with spears and crossbows. What kind of assassins were they? They were more like an army of soldiers dressed in night clothes. Jilin didn't know why these people were wearing night clothes during the day. It was obvious that they would be more eye-catching like this. However, perhaps they didn't care about it. Looking at the deafening battle cries, they didn't intend to be secretive. The 2 groups of people were killing each other. It was extremely tragic and filled up the narrow mountain path. But in such a narrow environment, the 2 groups of people were able to do it in an orderly manner. It was enough to show that they were well-trained and familiar with the terrain. Jilin took a quick glance and estimated that there were about 5,000 Imperial Guards. But there were less than 1,000 at the top of the mountain. The rest of the people were risking their lives to save the people at the top of the mountain. There were about 2,000 people in black, but they were guarding the dangerous terrain. They were blocking the enemy's reinforcements who wanted to go up the mountain while attacking the Imperial Guards camp at the top of the mountain. The camp at the top of the mountain was surrounded by enemies from all sides. The Imperial Guards were having a hard time. If it were not for the warriors risking their lives, they would not have been able to hold on. Brothers, we are risking our lives to hold on. It is time to serve the Empire. The brothers below will be here soon. A person wearing a general-style uniform shouted as he waved his sword in the middle of the battle. Hold on. I promise that all of these brothers will be promoted and become rich today. Kill. General, the brothers in the west cannot hold on. There are too many casualties. Old son, bring a group of brothers to support them. Hold on for a while longer. How are the mages setting up the formation? Immediately. This bunch of trash. How long has it been? What did the Empire raise them for? Set up the shield formation for me. Jilin nodded his head as he watched from the sky. Not bad. The other party acted quickly and ruthlessly. Third young master had only just sent him a message, and the other side had already made their move. No, it should be said that the matter was already more than half done. The camp at the top of the mountain was about to fall, and the Imperial Guards at the bottom of the mountain would not be able to come up for a while. The 7th princes should be dead for sure. He did not have to do anything. He just had to watch the 7th princes die. When the 3rd prince asked about it, he would just have to say that he did not make it in time. It was a perfect plan. The formation is set up. Brothers, retreat to the 2nd position. Pay attention. Don't rush. Don't mess up the formation. Retreat. Brothers, we are holding on. Now the enemy's arrows and spears cannot fly in. After the battle line has shrunk, even if there are many of them, they cannot spread out. We have already won. All that's left is to be alert. Don't accidentally die. Yes. Zero, did you see that? A man in black turned to ask his companion. Once our arrows enter the Imperial Guard's formation, they will suddenly lose their power and fall down, unable to hurt anyone at all. I'm not blind, of course I saw it. Zero took out a flat wine flask from his bosom and carefully stroked the patterns on it for a while. Then he took a big gulp and said, "This is the falling arrow array. It can be considered an inferior version of the forbidden space array. In the army, it is often used to resist the rain of arrows. Looks like the opposing general is not someone easy to deal with. To be able to calmly determine which formation is the most effective in a hurry and not waste the mage's magic for nothing, this is already a good response. You are drinking wine in front of 2 armies," the man in black said in disbelief. "This is not the time for 2 armies. I'm not a soldier now. I'm just an assassin." Zero finished the wine in the flask in a few gulps, and with a slight force of his palm, crushed the flask. "Besides, if you don't drink now, I'm afraid you won't have a chance. It's been hard on you," the man in black said. "It's not hard, I'm willing." Zero smiled. "As long as I can kill the 7 princes with my own hands, I don't care about anything else. This falling arrow formation, is there no way to deal with it?" The man in black asked. "If it was in front of 2 armies, this kind of thing is naturally not worth mentioning, but we don't have time now." Zero pulled out the long sword in his hand, the long sword clanking. "Then what do we do now?" the man in black asked. "Ha! Now that we're riding a tiger, there is no way to get off. What else can we do? Brothers, throw away the crossbows. The bastards of the Imperial Guards are waiting for us to fight hand to hand. Form the Yafong formation." Zero roared. "Yes, charge, kill." The men in black agilely formed a sharp Yafong formation behind Zero. It really looked like a black arrow, shooting towards the Imperial Guards. Since they could not spread out their forces on either side, they might as well concentrate on one point. The Yafong formation was usually used in a chaotic battle between 2 armies, or when the enemy's formation was in a mess. It was about advancing courageously. It could not be blocked by the enemy. Once the tip of the arrow stopped, the arrow would be considered broken. Therefore, Zero, as the tip of the arrow, had to cleanly break through the enemy's formation. There could not be a moment of stagnation. However, what stood in the way of the black arrow was not a scattered military formation, nor was it a chaotic battlefield. Instead, it was a solemn shield formation that was ready for battle. Under normal circumstances, colliding with a Yafong formation with a shield formation was undoubtedly courting death. However, Zero still chose to use the Yafong formation. One reason was because under the current circumstances, there was no better way. Another reason was that Zero was confident that he could break through the enemy's shield formation with a single slash. Even if the Empire's tower shield was made of pig iron and was 2 fingers thick. Army breaking slash. This was an ordinary military sword technique of the Middle Empire. However, in the hands of a beginner-level 8th-level expert, it appeared to have the power to break through an army of 1,000 with a single slash. "TSK, Chief Thief, don't be so arrogant." A thunderous shout rang out from the Imperial Guards. Following this shout, a small and exquisite arm shield appeared between Zero and the shield formation. Zero knew that things were not going well. However, his sword was too strong, and he could not retract it in time. He could only slash forward. A loud boom. Swords flew everywhere. The burly man holding the round shield could not help but retreat until his body leaned against the shield formation. Zero helplessly stopped his steps. The rest of the men in black did not stop and rushed past Zero. The Yafong formation without an arrow tip finally collided with the shield formation. The Yafong formation collapsed in an instant. However, the men in black did not give up and continued to attack the shield formation in vain. The burly man did not look at the men in black beside him. He only looked at Zero. What a tyrannical slash. Why would a dignified 8th-level expert want to be a traitor? Zero looked at the steel sword in his hand that had been broken in 2 and finally let go of it. When he saw the round shield, he knew that he had failed today as a powerhouse of the 8th stage and, at the same time, As the tip of the arrow formation, even a powerhouse of the ninth stage would have to avoid the tip of his sword. However, when the opponent had a treasure made by the dwarves, it was different. Aha! The heavens do not have eyes. Zero looked up to the sky and roared. The seventh prince's Li Ying is cruel and tyrannical by nature. As a prince, you disregarded the law. You caused my family to be destroyed. Today, I have specially come to take the life of the seventh princes. It is a pity that I failed at the last step. What a pity! Chapter 111. Good man. The burly man saw Zero's impassioned look and felt his blood boiling. He praised loudly. I am the commander of the Imperial Guards, Gong Sun Hu. Who are you? Tell me your name. Hearing Gong Sun Hu's words, even if Zero knew that his death was near and had the intention to die, he still cursed in his heart. Idiot. He was wearing a black suit and had his face covered. How could he tell him his name? I can't tell you, Zero said in a muffled voice. Is the arm shield in your hand, made by the dwarfs? Not bad, you have some eyesight. Gong Sun Hu patted the arm shield and said, It's a pity to kill you here. If you didn't have this shield, you wouldn't have been able to block my sword. Zero said, That's all you want to say? Gong Sun Hu said, Do you have any last words? I already said it just now. Zero said, You really don't want to tell me your name? You can call me Zero. Fine. Gong Sun Hu took out a pair of huge copper hammers from behind him and pounced on the unarmed Zero. Soldiers on the battlefield, no matter how much they appreciated the enemy, would never play the word fair. Zero also got into a fist dance. It seemed that even without his weapon, he did not intend to wait for death. Seeing that the battle was about to start, Gong Sun, who had only taken 2 steps forward before he stopped and looked up at the sky. Zero did not use this good opportunity to sneak an attack on him. Instead, he looked up like Gong Sun Hu. Not only the two of them, but all the humans present also stopped the weapons in their hands and stopped fighting. They also looked up at the sky. Everyone was horrified by what they saw, because they saw the sun slowly set from the sky. Moreover, it was falling toward his head. However, Jilin found this scene rather comical. All the humans on the ground were looking up like fish that had been deprived of oxygen in the water. They were trying their best to stick their heads out of the water. It was like the end of the world. No one had any chance of escaping. However, Zero could not help laughing as he faced death. He said, The heavens have eyes. My name is Tao Shu. Zero shouted at Gong Sun Hu. Damn it. Gong Sun Hu glanced at Tao Shu. So, it's the fireball, which was comparable to a small mountain, crashed to the ground with a loud bang. The sound was as loud as the explosion of divine thunder from the ninth heaven. The ground and mountains within 100 miles of Mount Guan were shaking. Mount Guan instantly began to burn. However, the amazing thing was that, logically speaking, such a large fireball should have been enough to set the entire Guan mountain and the surrounding mountains ablaze, causing the flames to soar into the sky. However, the fire stopped abruptly halfway up Mount Guan. It was as if someone had dug a wide fire ditch there. Jilin had already begun to leisurely fly in the direction of the capital. The purpose of this trip had already been achieved. He believed that, unless the 7 princes was not at the mountaintop camp, there was no way for the 7th princes to survive. Therefore, Jilin did not deliberately descend from the sky to see if the 7th princes had died. Moreover, Jilin felt that if the 7th princes could really survive his fireball, then he would pinch his nose and admit defeat. It was not a bad idea to let the 7th princes live. Humans, they never go according to my wishes. They always do things that are unexpected. Jilin thought to himself. Originally, things are going well. All he had to do was float in the sky and watch those black-clothed men hack the 7th princes to death with his own eyes. However, just as he was about to succeed, the 7th princes came up with an unknown magic formation and instantly turned the tables. The black-clothed men could only charge forward like a herd of wild boars. In the end, they all died miserably. They clearly knew that they couldn't defeat the shield formation, but they still charged forward one by one. Only humans could do something like lining up and sending themselves to their deaths. Aisha was right. The humans in this world were considered smart if they did not turn back until they saw the southern wall. There were even more people who did not turn back even if they saw the southern wall. However, most of these people died at the southern wall. Forget it. If they want to die, then so be it. However, I still have to kill the 7 princes. It was easy to deal with the 3rd prince, but Style was not so easy to fool. Yuqian County. Yuqian County was located between the capital and Mount Guan. It was the only way to get from the capital to Mount Guan. Yuqian County Yamen. An awe-inspiring general quickly walked into the Yamen. Aya, General Lin is here. The county magistrate hurriedly came out to welcome him. Lon County Magistrate. May I know why the county magistrate has called me here in such a hurry? General Lin went straight to the point. Just now. The county magistrate panted twice before he could catch his breath. There's a rider that's speeding through our county. Do you know what's going on? An urgent rider that went straight to the capital without causing a ruckus along the way. This means that it's not something good. General Lin frowned. And it didn't stop at our county. Could it be what? Lon County Magistrate asked anxiously. Could it be that something happened to the 7th princes? General Lin looked in the direction of Mount Guan and said, The 7th princes? Lon County Magistrate asked, What does it have to do with the 7th princes? There's a rumor in the military that the 7th princes, Li Ying, is at Mount Guan. Look, Lon County Magistrate pointed at Mount Guan. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. General Lin turned around and saw a fireball bigger than Mount Guan appear out of nowhere in the sky. It was slowly descending. This is... Lon County Magistrate's mouth trembled. He tried to say something, but couldn't say a complete sentence. Because this sudden scene was too shocking, and it was indeed beyond the range of what County Magistrate Lon could bear. Sir, be careful. General Lin turned around and pushed the county magistrate to the ground. Just as the two of them were lying on the ground, they heard a loud bang. Immediately after, a fierce gust of wind rolled over their bodies. Lon County Magistrate felt as if a ferocious beast had stepped on his back. If General Lin hadn't pushed him to the ground in time, with his civil official physique, this gust of wind would have blown him 2 or 3 somersaults. When the gust of wind passed, the county magistrate hurriedly got up and combed his messy hair back. He hurriedly looked in the direction of Mount Guan. Actually, there was no need to look. Lon County Magistrate could roughly guess what it looked like. However, he still didn't give up and took a look. Only, with this one look, Lon County Magistrate felt that his heart had really died. The flames at the top of Mount Guan were monstrous. From afar, it looked like a giant torch that had stood between heaven and earth since ancient times. Where is the 7th princes? Lon County Magistrate asked bitterly. The Mount Guan barracks, General Lin replied. That's good. County Magistrate Lin let out a long sigh of relief. I don't know why this fire is burning so strangely. It's only burning the area halfway up the mountain. There's no sign of it burning below the mountain. It seems like it's a blessing from the heavens. Since the Mount Guan barracks is at the foot of Mount Guan, this fire probably won't be able to reach the 7th princes. It's said that today is the day of the Mount Guan barracks maneuver. General Lin stuttered, sweat pouring down like rain. What do you mean? Lon County Magistrate asked. The 7th princes should be at the top of the mountain right now, General Lin said. Lon County Magistrate fell to the ground with a thump. An imperial prince had actually died right under his nose. Even though he died from a natural disaster. Wasn't this too shocking? Imperial palace, imperial study. Trash. Golden King fiercely slammed the secret document in his hand onto the table. A mere assassin, a killer, actually used the 800ly Express to ask for help from the capital. Golden King only read the beginning of the document and was already furious. He wondered how he had given birth to such a piece of trash. But as Golden King continued reading, his expression became calmer and calmer until it was like an ancient well without ripples. It was as calm as the sea before a storm. Even though it was calm, it was so calm that it made people tremble with fear and breathless. Summon Prime Minister to the palace. Golden King said in a calm tone. His personal eunuch hurriedly ran out. He didn't even care about his usual elegance and bearing. After following the emperor for so many years, he knew that the more important the matter was, the more the emperor would deliberately appear calm. Your subject, Zhuge Zhang, is here to see the emperor. Not long after, Prime Minister His Excellency stood outside the imperial study. "Come in," the emperor said. "How did you get here so quickly?" "When I saw the 800-mile express on the streets, I came to the palace early to wait for you," said the prime minister. "Yes." The emperor seemed to be in a better mood and nodded. "Look at this." The emperor placed the secret document beside the prime minister's desk. "Someone tried to assassinate the 7 princes?" The prime minister couldn't help but ask after reading the beginning. The emperor and the prime minister could not be blamed for their lack of shrewdness. It was just that this matter was very strange. In the Central Empire, except for the 3rd prince, the rest of the members of the royal family who were outside of the palace would be assassinated every few days. It was not even worth mentioning. Why would they need to travel 800 miles to do such a small thing? Moreover, the 7th prince was still in the Guanshan barracks, surrounded by a large number of soldiers. If he was still killed, then perhaps even the emperor would think that he deserved to die. There are more than 2,000 assassins. The prime minister couldn't help but exclaim as he continued reading. 2,000 assassins in a group. How was this still a group of assassins? This was clearly a group of rebels. "Ha ha!" The emperor laughed out loud, but his eyes were very cold and frightening. More than 2,000 assassins, arranged in a formation, and openly assassinated the prince, storming the barracks. "This is ridiculous. This is the biggest joke in the world." "Your Majesty, don't worry," the prime minister said. "Gongsun, who is also in the Guanshan barracks this time, he should be able to protect the 7th princes. Since they can secretly gather 2,000 well-trained people, why would they be afraid of you? A level 8 master?" The emperor snorted coldly. "Your Majesty, there aren't many level 9 masters in our country, and there are people watching every day," the prime minister said. "Your Majesty, urgent report." A shadow guard appeared in front of the emperor without warning. He knelt on the ground and presented a black envelope to the emperor with both hands. Chapter 112. The sudden appearance of the shadow guard interrupted what the prime minister was about to say. If it were anyone else, they would have choked to death. However, Prime Minister Zhuge was worthy of being called the old thief who stood at the top of the Middle Empire. He only pursed his lips slightly and swallowed back the words he was about to say. Strange things happened every year, but there were especially many this year. The members of the Shadow Guard had the privilege of meeting the emperor directly without reporting. This was something that the prime minister knew. However, after being the prime minister for so many years, he had never seen the Shadow Guard use this privilege. After all, no one wanted to scare the emperor for no reason or bump into something that they shouldn't see. No matter how big the matter was, it wouldn't make much of a difference. No one needed to joke about their lives for a few minutes, right? But today, this shadow guard appeared beside the emperor out of thin air. How big a matter was this? And judging from the 2 silver cloud patterns on the shadow guard's sleeves, this shadow guard was definitely not ordinary. It seemed that even the emperor was caught off guard by the abnormal behavior of the shadow guard. He first looked up at the prime minister, then picked up the black envelope from the shadow guard's hand. Beta Sagittarii, the emperor looked at the envelope and called out, "Do you know how many years it has been since the shadow guard used a black envelope?" "Your Majesty, since I joined the shadow guard, I have never seen a black envelope. Today is the first time, so I don't know," the Beta Sagittarii replied. "I don't know." The emperor sighed and opened the black envelope in the end. He only complained to the prime minister as he opened it. "Azin, why is it so difficult to be the emperor? If you get a hot potato, you could give it to someone else, but what about me? I want to give it to someone, but there's no one to give it to." Replying to your Majesty, "Your Majesty is a wise ruler throughout the ages. Your heart is concerned about the world, and you have racked your brains to think about it. Your Majesty is naturally troubled. However, your Majesty's calamity is indeed the blessing of the people and the fortune of a nation." The prime minister's flattery flowed smoothly from his mouth. "This is absurd." The emperor suddenly closed the letter in his hand and shouted angrily. The prime minister glanced at the emperor strangely, thinking that what he had just said seemed to be right. "See for yourself." The emperor threw the letter to the prime minister. The prime minister hurriedly took the letter and read, "May 21st, 201, a fireball fell from the sky on Mount Guan. The fireball was larger than the peak of the mountain. Above the mountainside of Mount Guan, the fire was burning and not even a blade of grass could be seen. However, not a single blade of grass or tree was burned at the foot of the mountain. There were almost no casualties in the Guanshan barracks. No one knew if the seventh princess was dead or alive. "What do you think?" the emperor asked. "Natural disaster." The prime minister had just said 2 words when the emperor raised his hand and interrupted him. Beta Sagittarii quickly summoned the great marshal of the West, Qin Lan, to the palace. The emperor said, "Yes." The Beta Sagittarii lowered his head and answered, then suddenly disappeared. "Natural disaster." The emperor snorted coldly. "A big star fell from the sky and smashed my son to death. How can I believe it? A fireball?" "Your Majesty, the letter did not say that something happened to the seventh princess," the prime minister said with a fist salute. "I'm fine. You don't have to be like this." The emperor walked back to the chair and sat down. He raised his right hand and picked up a pen. The tip of the pen stopped on the paper, but he did not write for a long time. The shadow guard said that Heir's fate was unknown. Most likely, he died without a corpse. The emperor sighed. In the end, he put the pen back on the pen holder and casually threw the edict that only had 1 ink dot on it to the prime minister. The edict announcing Heir's death. "You should help me write it. Your subject obeys." The prime minister picked up the edict and bowed with a fist salute. "Heir, you've seen him before," the emperor said. His mother, Consort Rome, was very competitive when she was young. At that time, she caused a lot of trouble in the harem. The prime minister lowered his head and did not speak. The emperor's family affairs involved the harem and concubines. After all, it was not something that a foreign subject like him could discuss in person, no matter how close he was to the emperor. When Heir was born, I didn't have the heart to give him a name. Consort Rome took the initiative to name him Ing. At that time, I felt that it was very generous, so I went with the flow and did not object. The emperor's eyes shone with fascination. You, on the other hand, seemed to disagree. You said that the name Ing was not good. It was too showy and could not be strong for long. It did not match the meaning of the imperial family's dignity. However, at that time, Consort Rome had just given birth and was very arrogant. She might not have listened to me, so why would she listen to you? In the end, she insisted on having her own way and decided on the name Liang. "Your Majesty, please restrain your grief," the prime minister said in a low voice. "I thought that I had forgotten about these things." The emperor laughed self-deprecatingly. "When Heir was alive, if you suddenly mentioned him, I'm afraid that I would have to think about it for a while. Now that he's dead, it's suddenly clear. Now, it seems that I have not cared enough for these children over the years. Your Majesty is the ruler of the country and the Son of Heaven. You have no choice but to take care of state affairs and family affairs," the prime minister said. Son of Heaven, Son of Heaven." The emperor sighed. "In the end, I'm not the Son of Heaven. I thought that I had a heart of stone, but I didn't expect that I still have emotions like a normal person. I just don't know how to tell Consort Rome about this. They're all members of the imperial family, so I'm sure that Consort Rome..." The prime minister didn't finish his sentence. The pain of losing a child was something that no one could bear. Reporting. The Western Marshal, Qin Lan, requests an audience. A loud and clear voice announced from outside the door. Reporting. The emperor calmly spat out a word. "This subject, the Western Marshal, Qin Lan, greets your Majesty." Qin Lan walked up the hall and bowed to the emperor. "Rise." "Qin Lan, how well do you control the guards in the capital?" The emperor asked. "Reporting to your Majesty, since returning to the capital, this subject has been ordered to take over and integrate the soldiers in the capital. Now, the soldiers in the capital and the surrounding military camps are under the control of the capital," Qin Lan said, "as expected of the Grand Marshal of our dynasty." The emperor praised. "Your Majesty praises me too much." Qin Lan cupped her fists and said, "This is this subject's duty. I don't know if you know about this." The emperor indicated to the prime minister and said, "Prime Minister, show the marshal." The prime minister understood tacitly and handed the urgent letter to Qianlong. Qianlong took it and only glanced at it before closing it. She replied, "Replying to your majesty, this subject already knows about this matter. I've already sent people to Guan Mountain as reinforcements. Guan Mountain is a strategic location, and there are more soldiers than the bandits. In addition, there's also the palace guard commander, Gong Sun Hu, beside the 7th princes. This subject believes that the 7th princes will be fine. Your majesty doesn't need to worry too much." "There's no need." The emperor laughed bitterly and shook his head. Qianlong raised her head in confusion. The prime minister glanced at the emperor, and the emperor nodded lightly. "Marshal Qin, please take a look." The prime minister handed a piece of paper to Qianlong. "This is a secret report from the Shadow Guard." Qianlong took it expressionlessly. She thought that the Shadow Guard was indeed a powerful organization. The speed at which they transmitted information was even slower than the military's. This time, when Qianlong saw the contents of the letter, her eyes widened. She suddenly raised her head and looked at the emperor. "Zhen will ask you." The emperor didn't wait for Qianlong to speak and spoke first. "You were with the guy Mingyue for a period of time, right?" "Yes," Qianlong said. "Then do you have any understanding of the guy Mingyue's strength?" The emperor asked. "Sir Sword Saint's abilities are unfathomable. He's like a boundless ocean, so deep that you can't see the bottom of it. I, your subject, am unable to see through him." Qianlong said. "Then do you think that the Sword Saint's abilities are comparable to the power of the fireball?" The emperor asked. Qianlong was silent for a long time. She slowly said, "This is the power of the heavens. It is not something that can be done by human strength." "The power of the heavens?" "The power of the heavens is unpredictable. How can it be so accurate?" The emperor said, "Let's not talk about it. This time, I called you here for 2 things. Your majesty, please instruct me." Qianlong said. "First, thoroughly investigate the surrounding military camps. See if there are any abnormalities in the number of people returning. Zhen wants to know where these 2,000 bandits came from. Second, find out if this fireball is a natural disaster or a man-made one. As long as it is not clear, Zhen will not be at ease." The emperor said, "Yes, your majesty. You may return." "Your majesty, your majesty." "Azan," the emperor called. "Yes, your majesty." The prime minister replied, "Go to Sword Mountain for Zhen. Invite the guy Mingyue into the palace." The emperor stood up and said, "The sharpest sword in the kingdom. It is not good to leave it empty in the mountains. Your majesty, please reconsider. You must not do this." The prime minister knelt on the ground and said anxiously, "Ever since the Sword Saint single-handedly destroyed the palace, it has been more than 10 years. "Of course I remember," the emperor said. "When imperial concubine Shu died, the guy Mingyue took their anger out on Zhen. They went to the palace and wanted to take the 3rd prince away. It's all thanks to the imperial palace's array that Lord Sword Saint was unable to achieve anything." The prime minister said, "But now that your majesty wants to invite the Sword Saint into the palace, what if? It's fine." Over the years, Zhen has left the palace several times, and the guy Mingyue has not tried to kill Zhen. The emperor said, "Moreover, you did not stop Zhen before. Of course the Sword Saint would not try to assassinate Zhen." The prime minister said, "But your majesty inviting him into the palace is a different matter." "Haha, the guy Mingyue will not kill Zhen," the emperor said confidently, "because the thing that is qualified to be Zhen's and his common enemy has already appeared. And a common enemy can always unite people. Therefore, as long as the shadow of the Red Calamity hangs over the Middle Empire, Zhen will not have to worry about the guy Mingyue personally killing Zhen." "Your majesty is right." The prime minister hesitated for a long time, but finally agreed with the emperor. "But, just in case, call the 3rd prince back to the palace. Go personally. Your majesty is wise." Chapter 113. Sigh. The prime minister walked out of the palace gates and looked up at the vast blue sky. Although the weather was good today, the prime minister's heart did not feel much better. "It's really precarious." The prime minister shook his sleeves, put his hands behind his back, and shook his head and sighed. His Majesty wanted to invite the Sword Saint to the palace. He wanted to use the most powerful sword in the empire to increase his chances of winning. There was nothing wrong with this. But for His Majesty, this sword was a double-edged sword. If he did not do it well, he would hurt himself before he hurt the enemy. Originally, the Prime Minister agreed with the Emperor's words. After all, with a strong enemy nearby, he believed that the Sword Saint would not do something that would destroy the city. If His Majesty died at this time, the Middle Empire would be in turmoil for a few years. How would the Middle Empire defend against foreign enemies then? But the Emperor's last words about inviting the third prince back to the palace completely left the Prime Minister a loss. It turned out that His Majesty did not have much confidence in this matter. He still had to take precautions. Well, inviting the Sword Saint back to the palace was inevitable. But inviting the third prince back to the palace was not easy. The third prince's stubbornness had long been known in the capital. If it was easy to get him to come back, he would have come back a long time ago. There would not be a chance for him to do this. The Prime Minister pondered for a long time and finally decided to go to a place first. Li Qi Umbrella Shop. The third prince lay behind the counter, flipping through the pages of a tattered book, but he could not read it. Ever since he knew that his seventh brother was in danger, he had been worried, sick all day. It was not that the third prince was close to the seventh prince's. Instead, he was not used to the seventh prince's domineering way of doing things. It was just that the seventh prince's matter was not so simple in the third prince's eyes. This represented a message, a sign. The competition between the princes of this generation was about to begin. This was also a tradition of the Middle Empire. Every generation of princes would die in succession over a period of time in order to fight for the throne. This was the rule of the Middle Empire's history, and every prince was well aware of it. This was also the fundamental reason why the relationship between the princes had always been at odds. If it wasn't for the benefits, who would be willing to build a good relationship with an opponent who would eventually fight to the death? Now that the seventh prince had made the first move, the next move would be unstoppable. "Young master, please have some tea." A pair of fair and slender hands placed a cup of tea on the counter, interrupting the third prince's train of thought. The third prince looked up at the brand new white porcelain teacup and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He really liked the limestone teacup from before, and after so many years of caressing it, he already had feelings for it. It was just that he had crushed it into powder when Marshal Qin came. "Young master, what's the matter?" The woman serving tea asked softly when she saw the third prince staring at the teacup in a daze. "Oh, nothing," the third prince said. "Spring Peach, is it appropriate for you to stay at my place every day?" "Oh, look at what you're saying. What's inappropriate about it?" Spring Peach said with a charming smile. "Young master, you've been staying at my Fengyue brothel all these years, and no one could pull you away. At this time, why are you still talking about whether it's appropriate or not?" "Well, things are different now." The third prince was slightly embarrassed as he glanced at the cloth shop next door. "Don't worry, big sister Xueqing won't be able to find fault with you." Spring Peach walked behind the third prince with a smile and reached out to gently massage the third prince's temples. "You're already so henpecked now. If you really marry her, won't you be completely taken advantage of?" "I'm happy to," the third prince said exasperatedly. "But even if you want to be completely taken advantage of, you need to have the opportunity first. Is the shop owner here?" Just as Spring Peach was about to speak, two people came in from the street. "Sorry, we're not doing business today. Please leave," the third prince said without even looking up. Spring Peach smiled apologetically at the two customers on behalf of the third prince. The third prince is indeed extraordinary. He's open for business in broad daylight, but he's not doing business. He's really different from the rest. The third prince suddenly stood up and looked at the people who came in. Only then did he realize that they were the Prime Minister Zhu Vizhang and the Minister of Rights, Ouyang Zhu. "Teacher, Prime Minister, long time no see." The third prince stood up and bowed to the two people. "It really has been a long time," the Prime Minister said with a smile. "Third prince, please forgive us for our sudden visit today." "Prime Minister, what are you saying?" The third prince said politely. "Spring Peach, quickly bring me 2 chairs." "Where did you get 2 chairs in your shop?" Spring Peach said, "There's only one, and I brought it myself from Chun Fenglu, then why don't you go next door and borrow one?" The third prince's eyebrows twitched as he said in a low voice, Oh, that I wonder why teacher and prime minister came together today. The third prince saw that Spring Peach had left, so he began to talk about the main topic. The third prince can be accompanied by a popular girl in this humble umbrella shop. No wonder you've been so happy these years that you don't want to go back to the palace. Ouyang Ju stroked his beard and nodded slightly. Teacher, you must be joking, the third prince said respectfully. This Spring Peach was not called here by this disciple. This disciple has been staying in Chunfeng Lu for a long time and has developed some feeling for the sisters. Now that I suddenly moved out, the sisters were worried and asked Spring Peach to look after me. There's no need to explain. Ouyang Ju waved his hand, looking very happy. As the saying goes, if a man is not romantic, he is not a man of letters. You have inherited some of my teachings. Not bad, huh? Elder Ouyang. The prime minister's face darkened. You are the minister of rights. The prime minister only said this sentence to remind Lord Ouyang to pay attention. But the prime minister thought more than he said. This Ouyang Ju was not only the minister of rights. He was also a senior official of 2 dynasties and a leader of the literary world of the Middle Empire. Even the current emperor was once a disciple of the Lord Ouyang. Of course, this generation of princes was also the Lord Ouyang's disciple. Therefore, the Lord Ouyang's position in the Middle Empire was very high, and it was self-evident. Other than His Majesty and the Sword Saint, no one else could compare to him. Therefore, even if the Lord Ouyang sat in the hall of the Ministry of Rights every day to fish in troubled waters, the prime minister did not think of doing anything. After all, this person only needed to sit there. However, the words that the Ouyang Ju and the third prince said just now really scare the prime minister. For the Lord Ouyang to say such words and be the teacher of the imperial family's disciples for so many years, wasn't it a little too bad? So what? The Ouyang Ju asked in surprise. Since you're the minister of rights, you should be the role model of the world. Old sir, please conduct yourself with dignity. The prime minister said, a fair lady is a gentleman's dream. This is the way of the heavens. This is human nature. How can I not conduct myself with dignity? The Ouyang Ju did not care. Teacher is right. The third prince cupped his fist and said, Humph. The prime minister coldly snorted and said no more. Ha. The Ouyang Ju laughed. The third prince has improved a lot. Compared to the other princes, you are now much stronger. It is all thanks to teacher's guidance. The third prince smiled and said humbly, Of course. The Ouyang Ju was not polite at all. If this old man did not send you to Spring Wind Brothel, you would not be as wonderful as you are now. What? The prime minister was shocked. It was you who sent the third prince to Spring Wind Brothel? Of course. Ouyang Ju was startled by the prime minister's words. When the third prince left the palace, he was still young. Although it was his own idea to enter the brothel, which brothel would allow such a child to enter. So, the prime minister's eyes widened. Since I became his teacher, I naturally could not wash my hands of this matter. So this old man took advantage of the situation and helped him. I could not watch a child miserably sleep on the streets. The Ouyang Ju chuckled. It seemed that he was very satisfied with his decision back then. The saint taught according to the individual's ability. Even if compared to the saint, he was like a firefly competing with the moon. But could it be considered that he had received some of the saint's moonlight? The Ouyang Ju looked at the third prince who was massaging his shoulders and thought proudly. The prime minister was now gnashing his teeth in hatred. What did he mean by it was his own idea? At that time, the third prince was still young. Where did this idea come from? Wasn't it because of you, shameless old man? I was wondering why the third prince went straight to the brothel as soon as he left the palace. So it was all arranged by you. No wonder you watched the third prince go to the brothel for so many years without asking. So it was you who sent him there. I was wondering why there was a brothel that opened day and night and let a child stay there for so many years. So it was all because of you, although he did not want to think so. The truth was that the Ouyang Ju's words in the brothel were more effective than His Majesty's. In the end, the Ouyang Ju's words, if you do not touch the dust of the brothel, you are not a scholar, were not wrong. Since ancient times, scholars and brothel workers had been 2 inseparable groups. They complimented each other and complimented each other. And with the Ouyang Ju's status among scholars, he did not need to spend money to enter the brothel 20 years ago. The prime minister was secretly annoyed and regretful. When the third prince's incident happened, it was not that he did not dare to investigate this old man, but that no one dared to think about him at all. Not even himself, not even his majesty. Old sir, you have really impressed me. The prime minister squeezed these words out from between his teeth. Not at all, not at all. Prime minister, you are too polite. Ouyang Ju smiled and returned the salute. Let's not talk about the past for now. Today, you and I have important matters to attend to. Old sir, you haven't forgotten, right? The prime minister said. I haven't forgotten. I haven't forgotten. Ouyang Ju said. That, I wonder why teacher and prime minister have come together today. The third prince saw that the two big shots were finally going to talk about the main topic, so he started again. Chapter 114. Please ask the third prince to return to the palace, said the prime minister. Ah. The third prince was stunned at first. Then he couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at Ouyang Ju. Teacher, what do you say? Ouyang Ju didn't immediately answer the third prince. Instead, he thought seriously for a while, then said, His Majesty needs you to return to the palace. But you can choose not to return. Lord Ouyang. The prime minister grabbed Ouyang Ju's wide sleeve. Do you know what you're saying? What? Is prime minister trying to scare me? Ouyang Ju looked askance at the prime minister without a trace of fear on his face. This is a serious matter. How can it be trifled with? Zhuge Zhang broke out in cold sweat. He thought that he had found a reliable helper, but it turned out to be the enemy who had hidden the deepest and deceived everyone. Now, he had fallen into a situation where he was betrayed and attacked from both sides. Whether it's a trifled with or not, let me finish. Ouyang Ju pulled the prime minister's hand away from his sleeve and slowly smoothed out the wrinkles. The so-called etiquette is nothing more than heaven, earth, king, father, and teacher. Third prince, do you have any objections? No. The third prince lowered his head and bowed, performing the etiquette of a disciple. Why do people have to follow etiquette? Tell me. Ouyang Ju looked at the third prince. The poem says, if people don't follow etiquette, why not die? If people don't follow etiquette, they will die. The third prince took out the book whose cover couldn't be seen from behind him and placed it in front of him. This disciple will never forget teacher's teachings. After all, His Majesty is your biological father, Ouyang Ju said. The prime minister was dumbfounded as he listened. He thought to himself that this Ouyang Ju was indeed worthy of being the leader of the literary world. This change of topic was not excessive at all, but it also did not seem stiff. Yes. The third prince lowered his head and replied. Now that Ouyang Ju was teaching him as a teacher, no matter what he thought, he couldn't contradict him. If he wanted to raise an objection, he could only do so with the teacher's permission or after the teacher had taught him. Although you haven't been in the palace all these years, you, the third prince, should have received a lot of money. Moreover, the money you spent on drinking in Spring Breeze brothel all these years was paid for by His Majesty. Ouyang Ju grabbed an umbrella and looked at it. As your father, it is His Majesty's responsibility to give birth to you and raise you. Although His Majesty has not done well for a monarch, it is already not bad. Yes. The third prince's voice became a little dry. Then, as a son, what should the third prince do? I asked the third prince to think carefully. Ouyang Ju put the umbrella back to its original place. Then today, the old minister will take his leave. Teacher, please take care. The third prince hurriedly said. As soon as he came out of the Li Qi umbrella shop, the prime minister quickly caught up with Ouyang Ju. What do you mean by this? The prime minister found that he couldn't see through the old man beside him. Did I come here for nothing today? You don't need a heavy hammer to beat the drum. Being frozen for 3 days isn't a day of cold. Ouyang Ju said with a smile. What's wrong with these two sentences? The prime minister's face was full of black lines. What I mean is don't always think that you can do it all at once. That's not realistic. Today, let's first knock some sense into it. Let's plan slowly and see what happens in the future. Ouyang Ju seemed to have a card up his sleeve. How do we plan slowly? The prime minister was a little puzzled. Use the carrot and stick. Use coercion and bribery. Ouyang-ju slowly said, and at the same time, he waved his hand at the scholars that were bowing to him. The third prince is a man of integrity. Everyone knows that. How do we coerce him? The prime minister felt that this old man wasn't very reliable. I don't know, the prime minister exclaimed. At the same time, he felt that his intuition was right. I've never coerced him before. How would I know? This kind of thing isn't something that people like you and me can do. Naturally, it has to be handed over to someone who can. Everything in the world has its own role. It's natural law. Ouyang-ju said. I see. The prime minister thought for a moment and seemed to understand. Old Sir is indeed farsighted. Since Sir Prime Minister already understands, then forgive me for taking my leave. Ouyang-ju bowed to the prime minister and turned to leave. But after taking 2 steps, Ouyang-ju felt that he couldn't walk anymore. He sighed and looked back. Sure enough, it was the prime minister who was grabbing Ouyang-ju's sleeve and not letting go. Take your leave? Ha! Old Sir said it so casually. Zhuge Zhang's face was full of evil intentions. I already know the whole story of the third prince. Do you think you can leave so easily today? Hurry up and follow me to the palace to meet the emperor. Ha! Ouyang-ju laughed. An old man laughing in the middle of the street immediately attracted the attention of the people on the street. What are you laughing at? Zhuge Zhang asked. I'm laughing at you. The empire's prime minister, who has led hundreds of officials for so many years, is actually so naive. Without any evidence, you actually want to drag me into the palace to meet the emperor? Ha ha! Dare I ask, Prime Minister, if this old man refuses to admit it and the situation becomes ugly, what will you do? Ouyang-ju was calm. I didn't dare to believe it just now. But it turns out that our country's literary guru is really a shameless old thief. The prime minister sneered. Haha, whatever you say. This old man wants to go home. I'll have to trouble Sir Prime Minister to explain to His Majesty. Ouyang-ju's expression didn't change, and he smiled like a spring breeze. You're home. The prime minister looked around. This place is still very far from the Ouyang Manor. Could it be that old Sir wants to walk back? The home I'm talking about is 1000 Flower Street. Ha ha! Ouyang-ju turned around and walked away. This old man can't do something like not entering my home 3 times. This time, the prime minister didn't stop him. He looked at the old man's somewhat stooped figure and thought. The saint said that at 30, no doubts at 40, knowing the destiny at 50, obedient at 60, and following one's heart's desires at 70. Then, the old man in front of him was afraid that he had already reached the realm of following one's heart's desires. As for the person who could coerce the third prince, it was naturally only Qianlong. When everyone comes to this world, they are covered in light. At first, they carefully hold it in their hands to illuminate this unfamiliar world and the darkness around them. In the darkness, they stagger forward. But with every step they take, the light in their hands will scatter a little. But humans can't stop, so they walk further and further until the light is exhausted. But humans don't feel anything. They are no longer afraid of the darkness. Because humans have long been used to it, they have long become pitch black. They have become part of the darkness, part of the world. Maybe this is what people call maturity. This morning, the third young master came uninvited and forcefully snatched a portion of breakfast from the giant dragon's mouth. After eating it, he said this. Aisha and Bane were stunned. They thought, what's wrong with this person? Is he crazy? Qilin, on the other hand, was very calm. After all, it was normal for humans to occasionally do things that didn't make sense. Only Staya was pleased to hear this. She even wanted to preach to the third prince. She said that believing in God can naturally save oneself, because God will guide people to the path of light. I didn't expect that you actually believe in the Church of Light. This is very rare in the Middle Empire. At least I haven't seen it in the capital for more than 10 years. The third prince was very surprised. Miss, where do you live? Why do you believe in religion? I can't tell you. Staya was a knight of light who couldn't lie, so she could only say this. I'm sorry. The third prince bowed. But I don't know if I should say something. Please speak. There's a saying in the Middle Empire, my fate is up to me, not the heavens. The third prince said. And things like the afterlife only exist in the descriptions of various religions. No one has ever seen it with their own eyes. In other words, humans can only live once in this life. So, everyone should choose their own way of living and the path they want to take. Then, why should humans walk on the path that God guides for humans? Or rather, in this world, humans don't need God to guide them anymore. Jilin shook his head slightly. He thought that the man in black, called Tao Shu, didn't think this way before he died. Staya didn't say anything. She only clenched her fists tightly and squinted her eyes. Everyone could see that she was trying her best to control herself. The third young master didn't expect that with just a few casual words, he would be able to infuriate this kind-hearted girl who was usually considerate of others. Perhaps this girl was one of the most devout people in the Church of Light. He didn't expect that there was such a person in the Middle Empire. The third prince looked at Staya's clenched fists. His heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He suddenly remembered that it was this pair of hands that tore down the door of Chunfeng restaurant with her bare hands. She easily threw it up to the third floor and even broke a door. I misspoke. Please don't blame me. Brother Long, I will take my leave now. By the way, please take care of my seventh brother. The third young master hurriedly got up and walked out in a hurry. Qilin nodded and was considered to have agreed. Staya watched as the third prince walked out of the door. She snorted and raised her hand to smash a chair next to her. Bane was shocked, looking at the broken chairs. He thought to himself that it was all thanks to third young master's quick escape. Staya didn't say anything else. She got up and went upstairs. She knew that there was no other way. If the Church of Light's philosophy was in other countries, even if they didn't accept it, they wouldn't be able to find fault with it. Only in the Middle Empire, when the supreme saint of the Middle Empire said, "Stay away from ghosts and gods," it was destined that the Church of Light would have a hard time in the Middle Empire. What's wrong? Ben asked in a low voice. Nothing. This is a cultural difference. Aisha looked at the broken chair next to her. All right, didn't want to learn witchcraft or magic. I'll teach you now. Okay. Bane's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but nod. Chapter 115. Bane and Aisha placed a pile of wood fragments in the courtyard. Bane focused his attention and watched Aisha's every move. Aisha was very satisfied with Bane's attitude. But looking at the pile of wood, her eyes rolled twice. After thinking for a moment, she said, Jilin, come here for a bit. What for? Jilin asked. Help me light a fire. Aisha said. Remember not to burn all the wood in one go. Do it yourself. Jilin didn't bother to move. Hurry up, Aisha shouted. Jilin cursed in his heart, thinking that he was becoming more and more degrading by being with these humans. A cluster of flames lit up on the pile of wood without any warning. At a distance of less than 20 meters, Jilin didn't even need to lift a finger to light a pile of wood. Look carefully. Aisha took out a small bottle filled with black powder from the dark scripture and placed it in front of the fire along with a piece of paper. Then she reached out and pulled out a strand of Bane's hair, rolled it up, and put it in the paper. Then she used her magic to draw a purple rune on the paper. This is a summoning rune, a basic spell used by witches to summon familiars. As long as the materials, method, and incantation are correct, even ordinary people can successfully use it, Aisha said. It's just that depending on the materials used and the host, the effects displayed will also vary greatly. Bane nodded repeatedly, indicating that he understood. Aisha threw the paper with the hair wrapped in it into the fire. Then she took out some black powder from the bottle and sprinkled it into the fire. The bonfire suddenly burned fiercely and shot up high in an instant. Billowing smoke rose into the air. This time, even Qilin's attention was drawn. He walked over to the fire and looked at it carefully. However, Jilin and Bane didn't see any changes even after watching for a long time. Only the green smoke continued to rise. Bane and Jilin looked at each other. Bane said carefully, Sister Aisha, what's wrong? Did you fail? Don't worry, Aisha said impatiently. Who do you think I am? I am a genius that only appears once every few hundred years among the witches. Ever since I was young, I have never failed in my magic. Look, they're here, Aisha said as she looked at the horizon. Bane immediately followed Aisha's line of sight happily. Even Jilin furrowed his brows as he looked towards the sky. He couldn't sense anything out of the ordinary with his perception, except for a single crow. The crow flew straight towards the small courtyard, but when it got close, it kept hovering in the sky, not daring to land. It just kept cawing in the sky, making people feel annoyed. This is? Bane looked at Aisha and asked. A familiar, Aisha said with a smile. But it seems to be just a crow, Bane said. And it seems to be afraid of people. It shouldn't be afraid of people. Aisha glanced at Jilin. Umph. Jilin snorted coldly and didn't look at it anymore. Here, you're familiar. Aisha raised her arm. The crow immediately flew down and landed on Aisha's forearm. Why would I want a crow? Bane was obviously disdainful. Bad luck. This was summoned by your hair. You really don't want it? Aisha said. No, Bane said firmly. Well, then it's mine. Anyway, it's a rune I drew, so I can use it. Aisha smiled and stroked the crow twice. From now on, I'll call it Xiaohei. Jilin couldn't help but chuckle. He thought that humans were always so careless when naming other creatures. In this world, if species weren't differentiated, there would probably be more creatures named Xiaohei than there were beastmen in a beastman tribe. Okay. Xiaohei is yours. Bane nodded perfunctorily. But if you want a familiar, why don't you use your own hair? My hair is not like yours. My hair is very precious, Elsa said in a matter-of-fact tone. If you don't know, then you're too stupid. Bane pursed his lips. He felt that it was because of Aisha's nature as a woman that she couldn't bear to use a single strand of her hair. However, he didn't intend to say anything. After all, women's love for beauty had existed since ancient times. Countless men would sometimes be happy, but sometimes feel helpless. However, Jilin couldn't help but smile. He knew that Aisha had used the magic of the dark scripture to achieve a state of eternal youth. Although he didn't know what the cost was, it shouldn't be small. And judging from various signs, the white-haired man at Staya's house probably became like this because of Aisha. Although Aisha wouldn't age now, she wouldn't grow either. It was as if Aisha's time was forever frozen at a certain moment in the past. Others didn't care about this, but Jilin could sense it. Strictly speaking, Aisha was no longer human. Therefore, Aisha wouldn't grow any more hair. It could be said that every strand of hair he pulled out was one strand less. Perhaps this was the reason why Aisha wanted to use Bane's hair. This was also the fundamental reason why Jilin looked at Aisha differently. It wasn't just because Aisha turned Jilin into a human and did fun things like catching princesses with Jilin. Aisha wasn't human, so she didn't have the same kind as Jilin. And Aisha could live for a very, very long time. Jilin would leave this world one day and go to Dragon Island. But before that, Jilin would stay here for a short period of time. However, this short period of time was too long for humans. It could be hundreds of years, thousands of years, or tens of thousands of years if they were unlucky. This period of time was enough for all the humans in this world to change dozens of times. The difference between humans and Megalosaurus couldn't even be described as the difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, Megalosaurus wouldn't be friends with humans, just like how humans wouldn't be friends with animals that could only live for a few seasons. When the things in the Middle Empire and the Wasteland were over, humans wouldn't disturb Jilin anymore. Jilin returned to the Red Dragon Palace. Maybe he just took a nap in the Red Dragon Palace, and when he woke up, Staya and Bane wouldn't be there anymore. At that time, the most likely creature that Jilin still knew, other than Bat-Tel and the other elemental creatures, would be Aisha. Therefore, Aisha was Jilin's true and only friend. Therefore, if Aisha wanted Jilin to help light the fire, then he would light it. Aisha wanted the crow to come down, but the crow didn't dare to offend Jilin when it saw that Jilin was next to her. Then, Jilin just had to restrain himself. It was a small matter. Aisha seemed to be really happy that she had a new familiar. She kept stroking it. Caw! Xiaohei was also very happy. It stretched its neck and made a sound. Jilin abruptly raised his head and glanced at the crow. From then on, Jilin never heard Black's loud cries again. The next day, the palace. After so many years, The third young master had finally returned to the inner palace. The third prince walked slowly from the palace gate to the imperial study. He didn't feel too emotional. It was just that the scenery that he thought he had forgotten was not unfamiliar to him now. He could still remember the roads and the palace and the various palaces. It seemed that a person's childhood had a deep influence on them. The third prince sighed and walked to the door of the imperial study. "Third brother, you're finally back. Father has missed you so much all these years." The eighth prince, Lilu, who had been guarding the door for the emperor all these years, greeted the third prince when he saw him from afar. "Little eighth." The third prince smiled and called out, 2 years ago, when I was outside the palace, I heard that you were guarding the door for His Majesty. I didn't believe it at first. Why do you have to do this? As a prince, it's not your place to do this job, right? Third brother, you know how I feel. In the imperial family, if you don't want to fight for the throne, you have to think of a way to protect yourself. I can't hide out of the palace like third brother, so I'll just put myself under father's nose. Lilu said, "That's fine too." The third prince raised his head and thought for a while before saying, "It's more than fine." The eighth prince said, "Third brother, you don't know, but the other brothers secretly put people by father's side. Look at me. I directly put myself by father's side openly. Nothing can go past me. How open and above board is this? This is the style of the imperial family. Don't you think so?" "Yes," the third prince said unhappily. "Eighth prince, you're extraordinary. You have strange ideas and found a new way. This brother deeply admires you." "Third brother, you're mocking me." The eighth prince patted the third prince lightly. "Ha, His Majesty is inside, right?" The third prince looked at the imperial study. "Father has been waiting for you for a long time." Eighth prince said, "Then let's go. Don't let His Majesty wait too long." The third prince said, "I've waited for so many years. I don't mind waiting a little longer. You two brothers can chat for a while." The emperor's voice came from the imperial study. The eighth prince glanced at the third prince and motioned for him to hurry in. The third prince nodded and walked into the imperial study. He only saw that the emperor was bent over the table and writing something. He didn't even look up when he came in. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The third prince kowtowed to the emperor. Then, without waiting for the emperor to speak, he stood up. He used his hands to brush the dust on his knees. Then, he saluted the emperor and said, "Your son greets father." When the emperor heard the third prince's first sentence, his eyebrows were raised. But when he heard the second sentence, he calmed down. He only snorted softly. He said that he had lived outside for so many years that he had lost his manners. The third prince saluted the emperor perfunctorily and didn't make any excuses. When a father scolded his son, no matter how you looked at it, the third prince could only listen and nod. "Sit," the emperor said. "Give the third prince a cup of tea." The third prince sat down and took a sip of the tea served by the servant. "You haven't tasted the tea in the palace for many years." The emperor lowered his head and said, "How does it feel?" The third prince listened to the emperor and took another sip of the tea. He smashed it twice seriously and tasted it for a while. "It's not as good as the tea in Spring Breeze restaurant," the third prince said seriously. Crack! The emperor's pen was crushed into 2 pieces. Chapter 116. The third prince saw that the emperor had accidentally crushed the fine weasel hair brush in his hand and couldn't help but feel a little guilty. The weasel hair brush on the emperor's desk was a top-grade item specially made by the palace treasury. The tip of the brush was made from a rare spirit wolf, and the body of the brush was made from the finest wood, purple goldwood. This wood was abnormally hard, comparable to iron and stone. Even if an ordinary person wielded a sword, they would not be able to harm it. But now, it was easily broken by the emperor with just a few fingers. The third prince could not determine the current emperor's cultivation level, but he was sure that he was no match for the emperor. In order to prevent the emperor from bringing out his father's identity and unreasonably beating him with his own hands, the third prince wisely shut his mouth and no longer said anything to provoke the emperor. After roaming the world for so many years, he knew that a wise man did not know when the odds were against him. "These years, have you been well outside?" After a long silence, the emperor still did not raise his head and asked. The third prince put down his teacup and answered, extremely happy. I do whatever I want all day long, and no one dares to provoke me. There's nothing that doesn't go my way. Are you really that happy? The emperor finally put down the brush in his hand and raised his head. Yes, the third prince replied. With such a waste, do you really not want to sit in my position? The emperor's eyes were deep. I've thought about it. The third prince paused for a moment before replying. You're quite honest. The emperor nodded. Since you want to, why don't you come back to the palace? That's because I know that I cannot compare to my 2 elder brothers and my other brothers, the third prince said. Ha ha. The emperor laughed. That's a lie. Although you left the palace when you were young and didn't spend much time with me, you were still young. But we still understand you. He looked like he stood aloof from worldly affairs, but in his bones, he was the most arrogant and unyielding. On the surface, she looks submissive to everyone, but in her heart, she's arrogant and looks down on everyone. I truly admire my 2 brothers, the third prince said. Oh, then tell me, what do you admire about your eldest brother and second brother? The emperor said with a smile. The third prince was surprised by this unexpected question. Eldest brother was born by the empress and is the true grandson of the eldest son. Not to mention other things, just based on this point, eldest brother inheriting the throne. However, his eldest brother did not become complacent because of this. Instead, he became even more determined and volunteered to join the army. After many years of war, he already has a great reputation in the army. As for second brother, he has been fond of poetry and books since he was a child. When he was young, he was known as a prodigy in the capital. Over the years, he has been helping His Majesty deal with state affairs. Everything is done in an orderly manner. Not bad. It seems that you are well informed even though you are outside the palace, the emperor said. The third prince's words. You talk about yourself? Haven't you done a good job all these years? The emperor handed over the documents he had just read to the eunuch. The third prince smiled, but did not say anything. He thought that the emperor was being sarcastic. The third prince of the capital. You're amazing. The emperor looked at the third prince and said, Since ancient times, the capital has been a place where the good and the bad mix. There are probably close to 100 gangs in Jianghu. Even if it's just in the capital, there are close to 10,000 people. But the third prince was able to take all the gangs under his command in the past few years. So much so that all the big and small events in the capital cannot escape the eyes and ears of the third prince. No matter which remote alley you walk in, you only need to raise your arm and call for help, and there will be as many people as the clouds. You could be considered to have deep roots in the capital. They're just friends in Jianghu, the third prince said. Compared to eldest brother and second brother, they're not worth mentioning. You've learned how to be humble. The emperor laughed. You can say that it's very hypocritical. Not bad. The third prince was a bit confused. He didn't know whether the emperor was saying good or bad things. He could only laugh dryly. However, the third young master's dry laugh was really too dry for him to continue. So the atmosphere in the royal study became a bit awkward. The emperor felt that his son's way of speaking to him was too perfunctory. The third prince felt that his father was just trying to find something to talk about. Even if he hadn't been in the palace for some time, how could his every move in the capital escape the emperor's eyes? This was the first time the emperor called the third prince by his name today. Since you don't want my position and you're living a comfortable life outside, why did you come back to the palace today? Marshal Qinlan told me that uncle would come to the palace today. The third prince said, You're my father after all. You gave birth to me and raised me. You've also helped me pay for all these years. I can't let anything happen to you. What a joke. The emperor slammed the table. I'm the emperor of the empire. What can happen to me? If you came back to the palace because of something so boring, then you can get lost now. There's no outsider here. Save your energy and don't pretend in front of me. After speaking, the third prince's habits of the underworld naturally flowed out. If I don't stay here and watch, I'm really afraid that uncle will get angrier the more he sees you. In the end, he won't be able to control himself and will stab you to death. Impudent. When had the emperor ever heard such words? He immediately flew into a rage. But there was nothing he could do. Although publicly cursing the emperor was a crime punishable by death, The emperor couldn't chop off his son's head just because he cursed him, so the emperor only cursed once before swallowing his anger. At the same time, he thought that it might be a good thing that this little bastard left the palace. Otherwise, he would have to live a few years less. Just as the emperor was about to say something, he suddenly felt a huge but incomparably sharp pressure. His heart sank, and he immediately shut his mouth. The empire's sharpest sword had finally arrived at the imperial palace. The third prince's martial arts realm was low, so he couldn't feel any pressure. He only felt a slight prickling pain on the skin on his face and arms. He was all too familiar with this feeling. The third prince stood up and shouted towards the outside of the imperial study. "Uncle, I'm still here." The sharp pressure suddenly mellowed, like a sword returning to its scabbard. "Why are you here?" Guy Mingwe suddenly appeared beside the third prince and asked in a low voice. Sword Saint's sudden appearance scared the guards outside of the imperial study out of their wits. Every one of them pulled out their swords and was about to rush in. But when they saw that it was Guy Mingwe, they quickly stopped in their tracks. It was just that they didn't know whether to keep their swords or not. In the end, the emperor waved his hand and the guards retreated. "Uncle, you're finally here." Sword Saint's sudden appearance didn't scare the already prepared the third prince. "Just now, my father broke a purple gold pen in front of me. I was so scared that I didn't even dare to breathe." "Don't be afraid." Guy Mingwe patted the third prince's head and smiled at the emperor. "It's been so many years. Your Majesty is still as majestic as ever. You actually scared her so much that she didn't even dare to breathe." Guy Mingwe didn't move at all, but the pen hanging on the rack in front of the emperor suddenly split into two. The top half fell messily on the table, while the bottom half was still hanging on the rack. Not one was spared, and the edges of each pen were as smooth as a mirror. It was as if they were cut in half by a sword master. "Wow!" the third prince exclaimed exaggeratedly. "Uncle is indeed mighty." Guy Mingwe, don't be too presumptuous. This is the palace, and I am the emperor. The emperor's expression was as gloomy as water. Ever since the emperor became the emperor, no one in the entire Middle Empire had ever seen such an expression on the emperor's face. Because normal people wouldn't be able to anger the emperor to this extent before they died. But Sword Saint was still as calm as ever. Although he couldn't kill his way into the palace from outside, he believed that he could kill his way out of the palace without any problems. "I know," Sword Saint said, "but so what? If you have the ability, take me down. You're still the same, unrepentant. You think you can do whatever you want just because you're in a higher realm," the emperor said sternly. The third prince looked at the furious emperor and felt a little strange. The third prince felt that Sword Saint's attitude towards the emperor was within his expectations. The third prince didn't believe that the emperor didn't expect this and wasn't prepared. The third prince didn't believe it, even if he was beaten to death. But since he was prepared, how could he be so angry that his voice was trembling? "If I don't do whatever I want, what's the use of my legendary realm?" Sword Saint said confidently. "It's because of your personality. If it wasn't because of this, Singer wouldn't have." The emperor pointed at Guy Mingwe with a trembling finger. "Shut up, Li Zheng. How dare you mention Minging?" Guy Mingwe suddenly became angry because the emperor didn't finish his sentence. She stretched out her right hand, and the 8th Prince Li Li's sword flew out from his waist and into Guy Mingwe's hand in an instant. "Today I'll just kill you and let you succeed the throne. This way I can answer to Minging." When the soldiers outside saw this, they were scared out of their wits. They immediately rushed in front of the emperor, drew their swords, and aimed at Sword Saint. At this time, even if they were a mantis trying to stop a chariot, they had to stop him. Looking at this tense scene, the third prince was calm and didn't panic at all. Instead, he counted with his fingers. Ever since Uncle married into the family, he had only said a few words to Father and had reached this stage. The third prince counted carefully. A total of less than 10 words. The third prince thought to himself, "Teacher, Prime Minister, Sister-in-law, they were indeed important officials of the country. They really had foresight and foresight. When Father and Uncle were together, they were really quick. Teacher said that when Uncle and His Majesty met, it was like a lit candle entering a gunpowder magazine. Prime Minister and Sister-in-law both praised teacher's analogy for being appropriate. He was indeed the literary leader of the Middle Empire. But who was Ming? Chapter 117. Wait, Sir Sword Saint, please wait. The Prime Minister shouted from afar as he ran over. The Prime Minister's frail body was carrying the heavy and complicated robe of the Prime Minister as he ran for his life. Even the third prince felt that it was a tragic sight. The civil officials of the empire were all about grace and elegance. Their every move had to be calm and graceful. This was even more so for the head of the civil officials, the Prime Minister. The robe of a civil official was not meant to be worn everywhere. Sir Sword Saint, you have to think this through. The empire cannot be without a ruler for even a day. The Prime Minister finally managed to run into the imperial study. He was panting as he spoke to the Sword Saint. I naturally understand this logic. The guy Mingwe said. In that case, Sir Sword Saint, please return the sword to the 8th prince. The Prime Minister let out a sigh of relief. Azin, you and I have known each other for decades. The guy Mingwe frowned as she thought for a moment. The first time I met Brother Guy was more than 30 years ago. The Prime Minister was stunned by the Sword Saint's words. The guy Mingwe hadn't called him that in many years. It's been so long. The Sword Saint sighed. Then, when have you ever seen me put down the sword in my hand when facing an enemy? Then what do you want? The Prime Minister was also angry. Do you really want to cause a commotion in the empire? If you help me, there won't be a problem. The guy Mingwe looked at the Prime Minister and said, How can I help you? Put down the sword. The Prime Minister was about to go crazy. You've been the Prime Minister of the Empire for many years. You've been the leader of the ministers, second only to one, but above all. I'll kill Li Zheng right now. Can you help me make you take the throne? Guy Mingwe said. Go my ass. The Prime Minister shouted angrily as he walked towards the Sword Saint's sword. If you want to kill His Majesty, you'll have to kill me first. Ha, Guy Mingwe chuckled. Even if you stand in front of me, I can still take Li Zheng's life without hurting you. Do you believe me? The Prime Minister didn't say anything. He just glared at the Guy Mingwe. As for what Guy Mingwe said, he naturally believed it. He wasn't the only one who believed it. He believed that everyone in the Middle Empire believed it. Don't worry, I promise you that after you takes the throne, you'll still be the Prime Minister. What do you think? Guy Mingwe said. Haha, Uncle, you're joking. Third young master had been watching the show for a while. When he turned his head and saw Ouyang Ju walking over, he said aloud, I can't be the emperor. I never joke. The Sword Saint said seriously. Then put down the sword. The third prince put his hand on the Sword Saint's hand and pressed it down. We're all family. Why do you have to do this? Although the third prince was using all his strength, the Sword Saint's hand still didn't move. Apart from Qi Lin, there was probably no other creature in this world that could press down the sword in the Sword Saint's hand. On the other hand, the Sword Saint looked at the third prince, thought for a moment, and put down the sword in his hand. I was careless. The Sword Saint said, He's your father after all. Killing him in front of you is indeed a little inappropriate. This could be careless. The third prince was a little surprised. Was killing his father in front of his son something that could be overlooked just because of carelessness? I'm glad. Guy Mingwe patted the third prince's shoulder. It seems that you're more like a member of the Guy family than a member of the Li family. What do you mean? The third prince was confused by his uncle's words. I thought that since your surname is Li, according to the Li family style, you shouldn't have stopped me. Instead, you should have helped me pull the Prime Minister away. That's what a child of the Li family should do. The Sword Saint said. That's why I didn't care about you. After the third prince and the emperor heard the Sword Saint's words, the father and son's faces darkened. The father and son wanted to refute the Sword Saint's words, but when they thought of the things that their ancestors had done, they didn't have the face to say it. All right, since the Sword Saint has thought it through, you may leave. The Prime Minister saw that the situation had stabilized, so he dismissed the guards. The guards didn't want to stay here any longer, so they immediately lowered their heads and left. Only the emperor was not very reconciled. Although he was not reconciled, he really could not do anything to Guy Mingwe at this moment. Thus, he could only temporarily pretend that the Sword Saint's attempt to offend the emperor did not happen. Seeing that the situation had calmed down, Even the third prince couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. He wondered if his father was too bored of being the emperor, so he let his uncle into the palace to find excitement. Third prince, show this to your uncle. The emperor gritted his teeth and took out a piece of black paper from the table and pushed it forward. There were only 4 people in the imperial study: the emperor, the sword saint, the prime minister, and himself. There wasn't even a single servant to serve them. Ouyang Ju saw that nothing was happening from afar, so he decisively turned back. Thus, he was the most suitable person to do these chores. The third prince looked at the piece of black paper and felt that it was very strange. Paper was common, but black paper was something he had never seen before. The reason was simple: because the ink was black. Thus, when the third prince received the black paper, he couldn't help but take a look at it. On it was written, 21 SD May 201. A fireball fell from the sky on Mount Guan. The fireball was larger than the mountain peak. The 7th prince's fate was unknown. The third prince felt as if he was struck by lightning and stood still on the ground. What's wrong? The sword saint asked. Father. 7th brother? The third prince turned around to look at the emperor. The emperor sighed, closed his eyes, and nodded with a heavy expression. Uncle, please take a look. The third prince handed the piece of black paper to the sword saint. The sword saint took it and glanced at it. A fireball fell from the sky, larger than the mountain peak. The sword saint's aura suddenly increased. I see. Otherwise, you wouldn't have let me enter the palace. How confident are you? The emperor asked in a low voice. 99%. The sword saint answered. Excluding the possibility of a natural disaster, which is negligible. Only the Red Calamity can do such a thing. In order to kill a single person, it destroyed an entire mountain peak and caused thousands of people to be buried with it. How magnanimous! That fire dragon came to the Middle Empire? The third prince asked. Sir Sword Saint, you've fought against the Red Calamity before. How do you think we should deal with this? The prime minister asked. Should we summon all the legend rank combatants of each country again? We've already tried that before. We couldn't win. The Sword Saint shook his head. That was in the Snow Wind Empire. The Snow Wind Empire is located in the north of the continent. Some legend rank combatants couldn't make it in time, or perhaps they didn't care. That's reasonable. The prime minister didn't give up. This time, it's indeed in the Middle Empire, and because of the battle between ice and fire, the Red Calamity has already become a mortal enemy to all who know about it. This time, the Sword Saint raised his hand to cut off the prime minister's words. Azin, you're confused. With a powerful enemy before us, how can you be afraid before even fighting? The Sword Saint said. You're right. I lost my composure. The prime minister took a deep breath and cupped his hands towards the Sword Saint. But how do we fight? I feel that what the prime minister said makes sense. What's wrong? The third prince suddenly said. Firstly, Azin said that because the Snow Wind Empire is located in a remote location, the legend rank combatants couldn't make it in time. However, more than half a month before the battle, the Snow Wind Empire had already sent out a signal to all the other empires. During this period of time, it was already enough for the Pope to bring a team from the Simi Empire. So how could the legend rank combatants not make it in time? That musin came from the southernmost region. Secondly, Azin said that people didn't pay attention to it before, and this is nonsense because he panicked. Ever since the Red Calamity destroyed the Simi Empire's palace and kidnapped the Church of Light Saintus, all the combatants in the world paid attention to it. How could they say that they didn't pay attention to it? But actually, the reason why I don't think this method will work is because it's not a matter of a few people. The difference is too great. If 5 people can't beat it, even 10 people can't beat it. The Sword Saint said. The third prince nodded, indicating that he understood. The third prince knew that the emperor and the prime minister obviously understood the meaning of the Sword Saint's words. They had known each other for many years, and they were all extremely intelligent people, so of course they could understand the meaning of the words. This was just an explanation for him to hear. But you don't seem to be at a loss. The emperor said. That's natural. The Sword Saint smiled faintly. After fighting with such a despairing creature, it's hard not to think about how to win day and night. So you're saying that while Lord Sword Saint is recuperating in seclusion, you've also been thinking about how to deal with the enemy? The Prime Minister said in surprise. I don't think I'm the only one thinking about it. Everyone who fought in that war is probably thinking about it as well. The Sword Saint said. They're all lucky to have survived. Then do you have a countermeasure? The Prime Minister asked. Originally, there wasn't one. The Sword Saint said. But this way it's hard to say. The Sword Saint waved the black paper in his hand, a smile appearing on his face, as if he was fighting with an enemy, planning a surprise attack in the midst of a barrage of sword strikes. It made people shudder. You mean? The Emperor looked at the black paper, his heart tightening. If this fails, the consequences will be unimaginable. The Prime Minister slammed the table and stood up. This is the capital, the most prosperous place in the empire. It protects countless citizens. If it fails, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. The empire will also be unable to recover. You're crazy. This is your problem as the Prime Minister. The Sword Saint said indifferently. In a situation where the difference in power is too great, of course we have to use everything we can. Even if it means we have to fight to survive. Don't you understand? Is there any other way? The Emperor asked. I don't have any. The Sword Saint said. If that's the case, then let's do it. The Emperor clenched his fist. But we can't afford to lose. Do you two understand? This humble subject obeys. The Prime Minister bowed respectfully to the Emperor. It's always been so. The Sword Saint said. Chapter 118. In the west of the Simi Empire, there was a small town by the border called Flans. It was a peaceful and beautiful place because there were very few people. But no matter how sparsely populated it was, as a town under the rule of the Simi Empire, it naturally had two essential facilities, the town center and the Church of Light. Right, perhaps one more should be added in the next few years. The Adventurers Guild, Roar, who had just turned 14 today, lived in this peaceful town as an attendant of the Church of Light. Happy birthday, Roar. The Adventurers Guild, which was usually unusually noisy, was even livelier today. His companions in the church, the adventurers who usually dragged Roar along because there were no priests, and Maine, who grew up with Roar. The little girl's eyebrows that had yet to open were not considered pretty, but the sweet smile of the pure girl beside the youth easily dazzled these people who usually licked blood on the edge of their blades, because it was indeed pure and beautiful, something that they did not have. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Roar thanked the crowd a little woodenly, seemingly because he was a little shy. Quickly blow out the candles and make a wish. Maine patted Roar's shoulder. The people around them also started to cheer. No one noticed that Roar's eyelids suddenly drooped. Perhaps these words were inappropriate for a person from the Church of Light to say, but things like praying and making wishes, Roar had stopped believing in them many years ago. Just like making a wish when seeing a shooting star, only children would be passionate about it. Adults would only look up and not care about it. But adults were once children, and they had made wishes before shooting stars. So why did they stop making wishes when they grew up? Naturally, it was because the wishes that they had made all these years had never come true. Roar did not want to make a wish, but he also did not want to spoil the mood of the people who had specially come to celebrate his birthday. He could only put his hands together, lower his head, and pretend to make a wish. He looked up and blew out the candles. Roar, what did you wish for? The bishop of the church asked. Roar was stunned by the question. Just as he was about to say something, a pair of hands suddenly stretched out from behind and covered Roar's mouth. You can't say, Maine said loudly. It won't work if I say it. Everyone laughed. Roar let out a sigh of relief in Maine's arms. The atmosphere of the banquet was very lively. Everyone was enjoying themselves in the name of celebrating Roar's birthday. Only Roar, accompanied by Maine, sat quietly in the lively crowd. If the third prince of the Middle Empire were to see this scene, he might even praise it by saying, it's like finding peace in the midst of chaos. Although Roar stood out in the crowd, the others did not mind. Even Maine just quietly accompanied him and did not say anything, because Roar had not smiled for many years. No matter how strange something was, after many years, it would not be strange anymore. Humans' ability to accept things was just that strong. Roar was also the son of an ordinary citizen when he was young. He lived with his parents and grandfather. Although they were not rich, under the protection of the Simai Empire and the Church of Light, they did not have to worry about food and clothing. Their life was stable. Roar never felt dissatisfied. Moreover, Maine, who grew up with him, played with him often. At that time, Roar spent all day playing with Maine and other friends. He never thought about the future, because he was at the age where he loved to play. Until one day, which could not be any more ordinary, disaster befell their family without warning. An unprecedented red megalosaurus soared freely in the sky. His grandfather, who was enjoying the cool air outside the house, was blown up by the hurricane caused by the flight of the megalosaurus and landed on a small hill. It was said that when the others found his grandfather, they did not even manage to collect his corpse. His parents were also killed by the collapsed house. Only Roar and Maine, who were playing together, survived. From that day onwards, Roar's world was destroyed. Roar was angry, unwilling, and wept bitterly. But he knew that he could not do anything. He might not be able to meet the culprit who killed his family again in his life. Moreover, even if he met it, what could he do? Compared to that thing, he was too powerless. But fortunately, as people said, there was no such thing as complete despair in this world. When Roar was 10 years old, he was discovered to have the magic of light in his body. From then on, he was adopted by the church. In a flash, for years had passed. Roar, how have you been to church recently? Maine asked. Roar held the glass filled with wine and nodded lightly. Everyone in the church is very good to me. That's true. Of course, Bishop Dread is a good person. Maine nodded with her arms crossed like an adult. But hey, a child your age can't drink, right? It's okay, I can. Roar said. Is that so? Yes. Oh, happy times always pass quickly. It seemed that in just a moment, night had taken over the sky. Roar, it's late. Send Maine home. Bishop Dread said. Okay. Roar agreed, but in his heart, he felt that it was unnecessary. What danger could there be in a small town with less than 200 families? The people in the town were familiar with each other. Even the merchants who came occasionally were acquaintances, not to mention strangers. Even if a foreign dog came into the town, everyone would be able to recognize it at a glance. However, no matter when or where, it was very dangerous for a girl to be alone in the middle of the night. This was an understanding that was carved into the bones of all humans. Therefore, Roar and Maine walked together on the road of the town. Hey, Roar. Maine called softly. Look at the sky. Maine pointed at the sky. What's wrong? Roar did not raise his head. From that day onwards, Roar was no longer willing to look at the sky, because he could always vaguely see the shadow of the megalosaurus in the empty sky. Look, the stars are so bright today. Maine's eyes that looked at the sky reflected thousands of stars. Yeah, Roar still did not raise his head. The stars were so bright every day. There was no mention of them getting brighter. It was just that those who were in a good mood thought that they were getting brighter. My mother said that the night not only brings darkness, but also the moon and stars. Maine said, that was only natural. Do you think the dead will turn into stars like in the books? Maine asked, that's impossible. Is that so? Yes. All right. We're at my door. Maine stopped and stood gracefully. Do you want to go in? No. Roar said, it's already very late. I still have to go back to the church. If Uncle and Auntie catch me, I won't be able to leave for a while. Sigh. Maine made a very regretful sound and looked at the sky again. I really wish it would rain now. Why? Roar asked. Then you won't be able to leave. Maine covered her mouth and chuckled. Roar was silent for a while and said, hurry up and go in. You're 14 years old today. Maine did not walk in the direction of the house. Instead, she asked this question out of the blue. Yes, Roar said. After a day of fun, he had a very deep understanding of the fact that he was already 14 years old. There are only 6 years left until you turn 20. Maine said. Yes. Roar nodded. This was an arithmetic problem with no possibility of error. Then, does the promise of marrying me when I'm 20 still count? Maine's face was red and her voice was very soft. Roar suddenly raised his head and looked at Maine's expression. He realized that this was a multiple-choice question with only one choice. Yes. Roar sighed and said firmly. That's good. Maine smiled brightly and jogged to Roar's side. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed Roar's face lightly. Happy birthday. After Maine said this, she quickly ran into the house. Her running and jumping figure was like a frightened deer. Only then did Luo Air come back to his senses. He blankly touched the place where Mayene had kissed him. Then he looked up at the night sky. Today's stars seemed to be especially bright. Roar thought in his heart. The town was not big. It did not take long for Roar to return to the church. However, after returning to the church, Roar did not immediately return to his sleeping place. Instead, as usual, he went to the church hall alone in the dead of night and sat quietly for a while. A few years felt like a day. His companions in the church all thought that Roar was praying sincerely and admired him. The bishop even made up his mind to let Roar take over the church. However, only Roar himself knew that he was not praying to the God of Light. He was really just sitting here. Every night, Roar seemed to think a lot, but also seemed to think of nothing. When he was lodging in Maine's house, in countless days and nights, Roar prayed to the God of Light countless times. After countless disappointments, the statue of the God of Light standing in the church hall was just an exquisitely made statue in Roar's eyes. That was the truth. However, today was not. Roar lowered his head and sat quietly. Suddenly, a bright light shone in his eyes. Roar was shocked. He raised his head and found that the statue of the God of Light had lit up. Roar stood up in a panic. He did not know if this was caused by the church's magic circle or someone's magic. He planned to call the bishop. No matter how he looked at it, it was no longer suitable for him to stay here alone. Roar was about to leave when a voice suddenly sounded behind him. It made him stop in his tracks. I am the God of Light. Young man, are you willing to be my emissary in the human world? Be the hero who slays the evil dragon and slays the demon king? Who are you? Chapter 119. I am the God of Light. Thou needn't be surprised. The glowing statue spoke again. God of Light. God of Light. Roar's lips couldn't stop trembling. Roar's heart was in turmoil. Although it was hard to believe, he wasn't worried that this was a prank or a conspiracy, because deep down, he was still a citizen of the Saimai Empire. In his subconscious, he firmly believed that in the Saimai Empire, no one would dare to make such a joke in the Church of Light. After reluctantly accepting the fact that the stone statue in front of him was the God of Light, Roar slowly knelt down. His head was very low. Roar's forehead was tightly pressed against the floor. Great God of Light, have you finally heard the prayers of a lowly man like me? Raul choked with sobs. Of course, so I have descended before thee. Art thou willing to be my emissary in the human world? The God of Light said, eradicate evil and crusade against the evil dragon? Of course I am willing. Roar cried. It's just that I am too humble and weak compared to the evil dragon. Light will naturally bestow power to its believers. The God of Light said. A small ball of light suddenly separated from the stone statue and floated to the floor in front of Roar's head. Roar slowly raised his head. In front of him was an unusually beautiful sword. The scabbard was blue and decorated with silver-white patterns. The hilt was golden with a blue gem at the top. This is? Roar asked. Pick up the holy sword, and thou art the emissary of light. Thou shalt obtain unparalleled power. The God of Light said, go to the island in the east. The oldest elf will guide you in the direction of your growth. After the God of Light finished speaking, the light around the stone statue slowly faded until it completely disappeared. No matter how crazily Roar shouted, there was no response. In the end, Roar gave up shouting for the God of Light, just like he did before. Roar waved his hand to wipe away the tears that still hung on his face, and bent down to pick up the holy sword on the ground. The moment he came into contact with the holy sword, Roar felt waves of light energy flowing towards him from the holy sword. It was extremely warm and comfortable, until Roar felt as if the sacred sword was a part of his body. Clang! The door of the auditorium was flung open, and the bishop rushed in. It seemed that Roar's previous frenzied cries did not cause the god of light to descend, but it did attract the attention of the bishop. "Roar, what's wrong?" The bishop held onto the stool and gasped for breath. If anyone else saw the bishop like this, they would be worried that the bishop would not be able to catch his breath. However, the bishop held his breath the moment he saw the sword in Roar's hand. It's the sacred sword," Roar said. "Where did it come from?" The bishop's voice was as loud as a bell. "The god of light has just descended," Roar said. "He bestowed the godly sword upon me." "Really?" The bishop looked at Roar in disbelief, but his eyes seemed to be filled with anticipation. A follower of the Church of Light, even if he is not a knight, he would not lie so easily, Roar said. "Besides, this is in front of the god of light, isn't it? Eternal light. Bless all living things." The bishop was so excited that he prostrated himself on the ground and kowtowed to the statue of the god of light. After a few kowtows, his forehead was bleeding profusely. Seeing this, Roar was shocked at first. Then he quickly pulled the bishop to stop him from kowtowing. "I finally saw the miracle of the god of light." The bishop was helped up by Roar, but his mouth was still muttering nonstop. "Good child, what did the god of light say to you?" The bishop held tightly onto Roar's sleeve. Roar gently helped the bishop to sit down on the stool. "The god of light told me." After hearing Roar's words, the bishop was so excited that he returned to his room and secretly wrote a letter. Only a day later, a group of knights said that they came from the sacred city, came to this border town that was rarely visited by outsiders, and took away Roar. This incident was spread around the town for a long time, and there were many different opinions, but they were all far from the truth. The only ones who knew the truth were the bishop and Maine. Before leaving, Roar and Maine secretly met. Roar took out the holy sword and showed it to Maine. Maine covered her mouth in shock. Maine asked if he really wanted to go. Roar said that this was a mission given by the god of light, and he could not go against it. Maine said that it was very dangerous. Roar said that the person with the holy sword would be invincible. A mere evil dragon was nothing. Maine said that he was being pretentious. Roar smiled shyly. Maine said that I will wait for you to come back. Roar said that after I kill the evil dragon and avenge my parents and grandfather, I will come back and marry you. Maine shook her head and said that you are fighting for everyone. Roar said that I understand. Sacred City, Sacred Light Cathedral. Yesterday, Fluns reported that the god of light had shown himself, bestowed the holy sword to the brave, and ordered the brave to suppress the evil dragon. What do you think about this? The Sacred Light King rarely came to the largest cathedral in the Semite Empire to discuss the matter of the brave with the Pope. Yes, the first time I heard about this, I was so scared that I dropped my scepter. The Pope said, the god of light had shown himself. Since the mythological era, there have been no records of this. And because the mythological era was so long ago, it became untraceable. In other words, all the rumors about the god of light were just rumors. I didn't expect that as the Pope, you would have such doubts about this matter, the Sacred Light King said. You are mocking me. You know how I feel about the god of light, the Pope said. The farther away one is from the fog, the clearer the fog is. If one is too close, they will not be able to see it. You're saying that the god of light is just a cloud of fog and is not real? The Sacred Light King said casually. That is what you said. I did not say that, the Pope said. What do you think would happen if there was a third person in the hall and he heard our conversation? The Sacred Light King asked with interest. The best guess would be that he would feel betrayed by his faith and then break down. The Pope was uncertain. What is the worst? The Sacred Light King asked. The worst would be that he would carry us, one in each hand, and then throw us into the fire as the world's most evil heretics to be burned alive? The Pope said, How did you become the Pope? The Sacred Light King was stunned by the Pope's words. He thought for a moment and then asked, That is a very long story, the Pope said, pretending to be deep. Let's not talk about the truth of this matter. What do you think? The Sacred Light King had dealt with the Pope for a long time. He knew that he could not let the Pope's thoughts wander too far, so he stiffly pulled the topic back. If it is true, then this matter is a little too old-fashioned, the Pope said. But if it is really the god of light, then I am afraid he has lived for a very long time. It is reasonable that he likes old-fashioned ways of doing things. That is not the point. The Sacred Light King slammed the sword in his hand. The point is, this hero will come to the sacred city in a few days. How are we going to deal with him? How many people know about this matter? The Pope asked. Should not be more than 10 people, the Sacred Light King said. Even the knights who want to welcome the hero do not know, the Pope asked. No, the Sacred Light King said. It seems that you do not want everyone to know about the hero's birth, the Pope said. It is the instinct of most monarchs to have a backup plan, the Sacred Light King said. Then why are you asking me, the Pope said. The Church has always been very good at influencing people's minds, so I want to ask if you have any different opinions, the Sacred Light King said. That was when Lord was still around. The Pope said faintly, I agree with your idea on this matter. Try to help the hero as much as possible, but it must be kept secret because we cannot guarantee the hero's safety now. No one can guarantee that if the news is released today, the red disaster will come to the sacred city and eat the hero tomorrow. Even if we know that the red disaster is in the Middle Empire and has just killed the 7 princes and brought along 1,000 or 2,000 people. Additionally, even if the God of Light chooses a hero, the preparation work of Iron Armor City should not be neglected. We can't put all our eggs in one basket. It's better to expect a hero to save the world. It's better to listen to fairy tales. You really don't look like a pope, the Sacred Light King said. You're not the only one who says that, the Pope said. All right then, this matter will be dealt with as such. The Sacred Light King stood up, looking like he was about to leave. Do you have anything else? You say, logically speaking, I am the person closest to the God of Light, so why didn't he give me the holy sword and make me the hero? The Pope asked, scratching his head as he looked at the magnificent statue of the God of Light. This is naturally because the God of Light is omniscient and wise, the Sacred Light King said as he turned around. What do you mean? The Pope shouted. Tomorrow, the hero will come to the sacred city. At that time, whether it is real or fake, and whether it is extraordinary, we will know with one look. Chapter 120. Jilin, who had been listening attentively to the third prince's words, suddenly let out a soft gasp and looked towards the western sky. He stared for a long time without saying a word. What's wrong? The third prince asked. It seems like something came. Jilin said solemnly. It seems like it left something behind and then left. What is it? The third prince asked. It's too far. Jilin shook his head lightly. I can't feel it clearly, but it's interesting. Is that so? The third prince followed Jilin's gaze and looked towards the west. But as expected, other than the blue sky and white clouds and the birds flying near the window, he could not see anything. Since when are there crows around here? The third prince saw the crows standing on the tree outside the window, looking straight into the house. He thought of what he had heard in the royal study yesterday, and suddenly felt very unlucky. He stood up and grabbed the teacup that Staya had placed on the table and drank all the tea in the cup. He quickly walked to the window and threw the teacup at the crows. Hey, what are you doing? When Bane realized what the third prince was going to do, he wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. The crows were startled by the teacup and flapped their wings to fly away. The third prince smiled proudly. He did not expect to hit the crows. He just wanted to scare them away. However, what happened next left third young master dumbfounded. Just as the teacup was about to fall to the ground and shatter into pieces, the crows quickly adjusted their bodies in the air. Like a black arrow, they turned and swooped down, accurately catching the teacup before it fell to the ground. Then, the crows flew from the third prince's head into the house and placed the teacup firmly on the table. Jilin glanced at the crows and nodded slightly. You raised this crow? The third prince was shocked. I took care of her 2 days ago. Bane walked over and picked Crow up to examine her carefully to see if she had been hurt by the third prince. This crow is really intelligent. The third prince laughed dryly. Yes, Bane replied casually, but he still looked at Crow. It was only when he saw that Xiao He was unharmed that he heaved a sigh of relief for the third prince. Aisha was a very stingy and unpredictable person. Bane had already deeply understood this point from the time he and Aisha had visited the Duke's mansion at night. As long as Aisha regarded something as hers, no matter if it was a person, a bird, or an object, Aisha would not cherish it. But if someone else bumped into it, hurt it, or damaged it, then it would be a problem. The first bowl of soup that Bane had drunk since he came to the Middle Empire was personally made by Aisha. Even now, Bane had engraved this in his heart. Even after so much time had passed, Bane still did not have the intention to visit a brothel again. So, you've been rambling since you entered the house. But what did you come here for today? Bane threw Xiao Hei out the window and said to the third prince. That's right. The third prince suddenly lowered his head and clenched his fists. This one came here today to tell Brother Long that this one has asked you to protect my little brother a few days ago. Brother Long, you don't have to worry about it anymore. What's wrong? Bane asked. Wait. Jilin suddenly stopped the third prince's words and closed his eyes for 2 seconds. That's enough. Continue. The third prince and Bane looked at each other and realized that they were both confused. Although the third prince felt that it was strange, he still continued. My little brother has unfortunately passed away, so there's no need to trouble Brother Long anymore. Passed away? Bane shouted in surprise. Then, he realized that his behavior was very inappropriate and quickly covered his mouth. Sorry. The third prince shook his head gently, indicating that he did not have to worry about it. Actually, this one did not spend much time with seventh brother. When I left the palace, he was still very young and did not remember much, the third prince said. But we are still brothers, so when this one found out that seventh brother was in trouble, I wanted to ask Brother Long to help and save him. Who knew? In the end, it was fate that could not be disobeyed. When did you pass away? Bane asked. On the day this one came to ask Brother Long for help, the third prince said. In that case, it was indeed too late. Bane sighed with endless regret. Do you know who harmed the seventh princes? Jilin tapped the table twice with his index finger and asked calmly. In that case, there was indeed a group of bandits dressed in black that attacked seventh brother that day. But we really do not know who it was. We also do not know where to start investigating, the third prince said. How is that possible? Bane questioned. No matter what, the Middle Empire was one of the 5 great empires of mankind, and it might even be the most powerful one. How could they not even find out who killed their own prince? As this one said just now, it is fate that cannot be disobeyed, the third prince said. What do you mean? Bane did not understand. He already knew that the people of the Middle Empire liked to blame the heavens and blame others. They clearly did not have much faith, but they liked to blame everything on the heavens. But this kind of thing did not seem to have anything to do with the heavens. Originally, if it was only the bandits, then seventh brother would have been fine. But unexpectedly, a fireball suddenly fell from the sky. Seventh brother, more than 1,000 soldiers, and a group of bandits were all buried in the sea of fire. Not even their bones were left. Therefore, we were unable to find out the identity of the bandits, the third prince said. Crack! Bane, who was about to take a sip of tea, suddenly dropped the teacup in his hand. Jilin glanced at the teacup that had shattered into pieces. He thought to himself, did a cup have to break today? What's wrong? The third prince looked at Bane strangely. Nothing. It's just that this news is too shocking. Is this true? Bane quickly got up and bent over to wipe off the tea that had splashed onto his trousers to hide the uncontrollable shock in his eyes. Since Jilin personally killed the 7th princes, then the 3rd prince could no longer be considered one of them. No. Now, the entire Middle Empire was an enemy camp. Why would I lie about this matter? The 3rd prince was a little angry at Bane's questioning. Now, there's a crater at the top of Mount Guan that was created by the fireball. You can go and see for yourself. No, I just find it hard to believe. Bane quickly waved his hands. No wonder the 3rd prince said that it was hard to go against the will of the heavens. Then do you know why the thief wanted to assassinate the 7th prince? Jilin asked. Although I don't know, there are only a few reasons for something as risky as assassinating a prince. There's nothing new about it, the 3rd prince said. Then will the other princes be in danger as well? Jilin asked. Do you need me to do it? Bane's eyes widened. He thought to himself, isn't killing one prince enough? I don't know. The third prince hesitated for a moment. That's fine. If you still need me to protect your brothers in the future, just let me know, Jilin said after a moment of silence. Thank you, Brother Long. The third prince looked very touched and bowed to Jilin. It's fine, Jilin said. It's just that I have to ask you something. Please speak, Brother Long, the third prince said. Now that you're asking me to protect your brothers, I don't know if you've thought about it, but once your brothers are all dead, you'll be the next emperor of the Middle Empire. Don't you want that? Jilin said. After you become the emperor, even if you want Xueqing to be the empress, you might not be able to do it. I'll take my leave. Brother Long, take care. The third prince's eyes narrowed into slits. He cupped his hands and turned to leave. The third prince, take care. Bane watched as the third prince angrily walked out the door. He turned around and closed the door and windows tightly. Are you crazy? Jilin looked at Bane's abnormal behavior and said strangely, Did you really kill the 7 princes? Bane walked to Jilin and whispered, Yes. Jilin pushed away Bane, who was too close to him, and said very calmly, What do you want to do in the Middle Empire? Bane thought about this question for the first time since he came to the Middle Empire. What did you want to do here? I need something called the Imperial Jade Seal of this country. Jilin said, You want their Imperial Jade Seal? Bane shouted. He immediately covered his mouth and looked around in panic. After confirming that there was no one around, he whispered, What do you want that for? To you. It's just a beautiful stone. I don't want it. I just want to borrow it for a while. Jilin felt that Bane was making a mountain out of a molehill. But they won't lend it to you. Bane said speechlessly. The Middle Empire treats the Imperial Jade Seal like their lifeblood. Which race doesn't know about this? If you dare to ask them to borrow it for a while, they won't even wait until tomorrow. They will fight you to the death on the spot. That's why I borrowed it in another way. Jilin said, What does this have to do with you killing the 7 princes? Bane said, I want the Imperial Jade Seal. But as you said, these humans treat a stone more important than their lives. This gives me a headache. Jilin imitated humans and rubbed his forehead. Bane thought to himself, Dragons can have headaches. He really learned something today. I'll let you steal it from the palace. But even I don't think it's a good idea. Let's just do it by force. Perhaps half of the capital city will be gone. This isn't what I want. Back then, my mother told me to cherish life. I think she's right. Jilin said with a face full of reminiscence. I just heard the third prince say that there are 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers who died. Do you have some misunderstanding about what your mother said? Bane said, There are too many humans. I can't cherish their lives, but I will be careful. Jilin said with a smile. It doesn't matter if you're careful or not. Bane waved his hand. No, it's a lot different. Jilin said with a smile. Chapter 121. Bane really didn't know where to start complaining about Jilin's words. In Bane's opinion, it was not an exaggeration to say that those people killed by Jilin were lunatics. Oh, even with your current state, you're still very careful, right? Are the people you've killed already the result of your respect for life, your reluctance to take lives, and your mercy? Are you saying that if you weren't careful, the entire human empire would be gone? If that's the case, then why did you kill the princes? What does this have to do with the Imperial Jade Seal? Bane put down his complaints and asked seriously, Isn't it obvious? Jilin was a little impatient. I want to make the third prince the emperor and then ask him to lend me the Imperial Jade Seal for a while. You want to make the third prince the emperor by killing all the other princes? Bane's eyes were wide open. Yes, Jilin said. Is there no other way? Is there need to be so blunt? Bane asked. There is, but it's not suitable for me. I tried but failed. Jilin said with a regretful expression. Bane looked at Jilin's expression and was furious. If he didn't know that he couldn't beat him, Bane really wanted to spit in his face. Bane thought to himself, You're regretting? You're about to kill your entire family. Shouldn't he be the one feeling regretful? When did you try? Why didn't I know? Bane felt like he had unknowingly missed out on a lot. Xueqing. Jilin calmly said a name. Bane was silent for a long time. He thought to himself, You're really an animal. Then how can you be sure that the third prince will lend you the Imperial Jade Seal after he becomes the emperor? Bane paused and said, I think you've underestimated the Middle Empire's obsession with that stone. This is Aisha's business, Jilin said. She'll take care of it. Bane lowered his head and didn't say anything. Since Aisha was involved, then this matter should be somewhat reliable. Moreover, he had never seen Jilin put so much effort into anything. In the face of this matter, not only did Jilin not act on it directly, he even used his brain before taking action and planned it out. This was really too rare. Bane could feel Jilin's determination in every aspect. And Bane, who had seen Jilin's strength, believed that no matter what it was, as long as Jilin was serious, then he would definitely achieve his goal. It was just that the method might be different. Therefore, Jilin would definitely be able to get the Imperial Jade Seal. The only difference was whether a few thousand people would be buried with him or half of the capital would be buried with him. According to the best-case scenario, if they really followed Jilin's script, they would be able to kill nearly 20 princes, but perhaps tens of thousands of innocent people would be sacrificed. After all, just to kill the unprepared 7th princes, more than 2,000 people would be buried with him. Who knew what the remaining princes had prepared? No matter what method it was, the result would be a great loss of life. This was Bane's judgment. This was a scene that Bane didn't want to see, even though he didn't know the people here. And even though to Bane, the people of the Central Empire were all arrogant, pretentious, and annoying, he didn't want to see them. But Bane still didn't want to see it, because they were all humans just like him. The fox grieves for the rabbit's death. Animals grieve for their own kind. This was the natural, fragile nature of humans. Perhaps it was because all humans were in the same boat. No matter how different the trajectories of life were, in the end, they would all return to the same destination. Actually, Bane lowered his head and was silent for a long time. Finally, he raised his head and looked at Jilin. As long as Aisha helps me with all her strength, I might be able to steal the Imperial Jade Seal. Huh, Jilin sneered. Jilin squinted his eyes and pressed his thumb between his eyebrows. He looked at Bane as if he was looking at an idiot, full of sympathy and ridicule. Why are you looking at me like that? Bane was a little flustered by Jilin's gaze. It's nothing. I just suddenly realized that you're also a human. Jilin said. What do you mean? Bane shouted. Arrogant, stupid, easy to lose your mind. You've embodied these characteristics of humans very well. Jilin said. Don't underestimate me. Bane slammed the table hard. Are you sure? Jilin asked. Yes. Bane nodded. You will die. Jilin said. Even I may not be able to save you. The one here is only my clone. Do you know that? I know. Bane said. Then are you an idiot? Jilin said. Bane looked at Jilin and did not speak. Could it be that you have been by my side for too long and finally despaired of the short lifespan of humans? Are you tired of living and want to die? Jilin seriously pondered. If that is the case, then seeing that you and I have been together for so long, you don't have to trouble the guards in the palace. I will send you on your way. How about it? It is a human's honor to die in my hands. I guarantee that even if you go to hell, you will be a master. How do you know that I will definitely go to hell after I die? Bane's face darkened. Of course, you think that anyone can go to heaven? How about it? Do you need my help? Jilin's fingertips suddenly lit up with a small flame. No, Bane roared. Then if you are not an idiot and haven't lived long enough, are you still a good person? No wonder humans say that good people don't live long, but scourges live for thousands of years. It seems that there is some truth to it. Jilin said. I don't want to die. Bane said. I really think that this is feasible. Aren't you underestimating your human palace too much? Jilin said. I think you're the one who thinks too highly of it. Aisha was the most powerful witch in the history of the world. This was a well-known fact. As long as she helps, I believe that even if I can't steal it, it will not be a problem to return it. Bane said. You are quite determined. Jilin said unexpectedly. I want to try. Bane said. Good. Then give a try. Aisha's voice suddenly sounded. A magic circle lit up on the stone floor of the hall. It was Aisha's teleportation circle. I didn't expect you to be so daring. Aisha walked out of the magic circle and walked to Bane's side. She patted Bane's shoulder affectionately. For some reason, Bane, who was originally very determined, felt a little guilty after receiving Aisha's promise. Bane thought carefully and understood. If he did this, even if there was a slight chance of success, even if he was killed before entering the palace, at least he would know how he died. But if Aisha was involved, Bane felt that he might not even know how he died, sneaking into the palace and stealing the Middle Empire's imperial jade seal. You are the first person I have seen who thought of this. Not bad, not bad. You have really broadened my horizons. Aisha said. What horizons? Jilin asked. Although there is an upper limit to a person's wisdom, there is no lower limit. Aisha looked at Bane and said, Didn't you also say that we could try? Bane said, Yes, we could try. This is something that has never been done before and will never be done in the future. It is worth a try, but there is no guarantee of success. Aisha said with a smile as she walked to the front of the chair and sat down with her legs crossed. Her curvaceous body moved casually, and all kinds of flirtatious expressions were on the verge of appearing. Bane couldn't help but secretly swallow a mouthful of saliva. If you are serious about it, how confident are you? Jilin asked. 5%, 5%, 5%, Aisha said. So little. Bane was shocked. What do you think? Aisha slammed the table. That is the palace of the Middle Empire. Even when the Sword Saint tried to force his way in with his sword, he couldn't even get through the main door. Now you want to steal the Imperial seal. But if you really want to go, I won't stop you. I'm not going through the main door. Bane said. If someone finds out, how confident are you that he can escape unscathed? Jilin said. 30%. Aisha thought for a moment and said. What do you think? Jilin asked Bane. I'll go. Bane said. He. Aisha's laughter was creepy. I always thought that although some people are stupid, as long as they are human, they have brains. But now, you made me doubt my own point of view. If you insist, then give it a try. Jilin said. After all, living for more than 20 years is the same as living for 1 or 200 years. Only the dragon race and the elf race can say something like that. Aisha complained. The elf race? How long can they live? Jilin asked. A few thousand years. Aisha looked up and said. Where do they live? Jilin asked. Over there. Aisha pointed to the east. There are elves in the Divine Dragon Empire? Staya, who had just returned, asked. Why haven't I heard of it? Further east. Aisha said. Further east is the sea. The endless sea. Staya said. There's an island in the sea. Aisha said. How do we get there? Jilin asked. I don't know. It said that without the guidance of the gods, outsiders can never set foot on that island. Aisha said. Then I would like to take a look. Jilin said. Sure. If it's you, I think there's a high chance that you can find that island. Aisha said happily. The elf race's island. The legendary dreamland? I want to see it with my own eyes. Staya's eyes lit up. Okay, let's go together. Jilin said. Hey. Bane shouted. What about me? You? Aisha looked conflicted. She was thinking about how to organize her words. It was hard to say, do you think I'm dead for sure? Bane asked. Yeah. Jilin and Aisha nodded in unison. They felt that Bane suddenly grew a brain and became smart for once. Chapter 122. Although Bane's decision was very stupid in Jilin and Aisha's eyes, it was a completely irrational decision. In the end, humans were not creatures that could always be rational. Therefore, they did not stop Bane from stealing the jade seal from the palace. After all, if a person really wanted to die, no one could stop them. Listen carefully. I'm only going to say this once. Aisha said to Bane seriously. Everyone knows that the palace of the Middle Empire is not a simple place, but not many people know exactly what is so special about it. Do you know? Staya said. No. What are you going to do to the palace of the Middle Empire? Nothing. Bane is going to steal something, Jilin said casually. What? Staya was shocked. Bane, I'll explain to you alone later, Bane said in a low voice. Okay. Staya nodded quickly. Although she did not know what Bane was going to steal from the palace, she knew that Bane definitely knew how dangerous it was. Entering the palace to steal something, and a small thief like Bane at that, it would be an understatement to say that he had a slim chance of survival. However, Bane already knew how dangerous it was, but he still made up his mind to do it. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, that was his resolution. Therefore, Staya was willing to believe in Bane. The Middle Empire placed too much importance on their emperor. It even felt like the emperor was the empire. Therefore, they did not care about the cost of protecting the palace. It was impenetrable, Aisha said. From what I know, there are at least 7 formations that can cover the entire palace. Moreover, the formations complemented each other and had their own functions. If it was a normal person, they would be discovered the moment they stepped on the palace grounds. Also, the entire palace is a restricted area. You can't fly. The walls of the imperial palace could not be touched nor overturned. As for the entrance to the imperial palace, there was no need to even think about it. Furthermore, some of the important halls in the imperial palace had their own separate array formations. Of course, there are countless guards in the palace. Aisha explained to Bane the things to take note of when sneaking into the palace. It was fine at first, but for some reason, Aisha spoke faster and faster, and the more she spoke, the angrier she became. In the end, there seemed to be some resentment in her words. "Why are you so familiar with the palace of the Middle Empire?" Staya asked. "Do you think I'm called the continent's most evil witch for nothing? You don't even know this? You're the current saintess of the light. Doesn't the Church of Light know what it means to know your enemy?" Aisha mocked. "He's just a loser, a speck of history. Not worth mentioning," Staya said. "Loser?" Aisha rolled up her sleeves and was about to rush forward. "If it wasn't for... Don't, Sister Aisha, you definitely won't be able to defeat Staya in a physical fight." Bane quickly blocked in front of Aisha. Aisha obviously understood what Bane said. She knew that she would be the one at a disadvantage if they really fought at this distance of 2 steps. Therefore, when she saw Bane taking the initiative to give her a way out, she humphed coldly and gave up. Aisha was an extremely calm person. Under normal circumstances, she would not be so reckless. However, Staya had just stepped on her sore spot, so she could not control herself. "I wanted to enter the palace of the Middle Empire many years ago, but the risk was too high. It was not worth it, so I didn't go in the end," Aisha said. "Why would you want to enter the palace?" Jilin asked. "There are many good things in the palace," Aisha said. "You can't enter this palace. Why don't you change to another one?" Jilin said. "Who said I didn't change?" Aisha raised her eyebrows and said proudly. "Let me tell you, I've even tried to enter the palaces of the 5 empires." Oh, as a thief, Bane immediately treated Aisha as a fellow thief when he heard her bold words. She was the leader of the industry. Look at the people around him. They only knew how to steal chickens and dogs. They were so useless. If word got out, it would be a disgrace to their ancestors. Look at her. She stole from the palace. She is the role model of our generation. So, Sister Aisha, how many businesses have you done? Aisha hesitated for a moment and raised 3 fingers. Apart from the Middle Empire, which other empire's palace can make Sister Aisha helpless? Bane asked curiously. "Do you really want to die in the palace?" Aisha's tone suddenly became gloomy. No, I won't ask. Bane's hair stood on end. He knew that he had poked Aisha's sore spot. He regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. He wanted to slap himself in the face. Aisha angrily looked up at the roof. She thought that Bane was a big idiot. Everyone in the world knew that if there was a place that a witch could never go, it would most likely be the palace of the Saimai Empire in the Church of Light. This was also a fact that all witches were unwilling to admit. Moreover, Staya was still in front of them. How could they say this out loud? Is there any way to not be discovered by the palace's magic circle? Bane asked. There is. Aisha said. It's just that the risk is really high. I'm mentally prepared. Bane said. Really? Jilin said. Do you have any last words or anything? I heard that humans like to say something before they die, or write a will or something. Now that you mention it, it seems like there is nothing to say. Bane said. I'm not going to die. Well, as long as you don't have any last words. Jilin nodded. No, there's one more thing. Bane suddenly had an idea. Say it. Jilin said. In case. Bane said. If something really happens to me, don't try to save me. If that's the case, then I'll also say in case. Jilin had a playful smile on his face. Okay, in case you really come back, and if one day you want to duel with me, I'll let you go first and give you a chance to attack. If you lose, I'll let you go once. This is the greatest respect that the dragon race can give you. This is a promise that I, the son of the Fire Dragon King and the Golden Dragon King, make. You can rest assured. Ah, okay. Bane looked at Jilin, who was rarely serious, and felt a little confused. He thought to himself, how crazy must I be to want to duel with you? Let me attack first? Does it make a difference to you whether I attack first or not? That promise was completely useless, all right? Then, give me 2 days to prepare, Aisha said. 2 days later, we'll start. Okay. 2 days later, night fell. Bane, who was ready to go, hid in an alley 2 streets away from the Imperial City. At night, the capital was brightly lit, and there was a hubbub of voices everywhere. It was unusually lively, as if it was daytime. Looking down from the sky, the capital city at night was like a bright pearl embellished on the dark earth, brilliant and dazzling. This was the prosperity of the human world. But this prosperity definitely did not include the Imperial Palace and the area 3 miles around it. As soon as night fell, soldiers would start patrolling within 3 miles of the Imperial Palace. Although it was not a curfew, ordinary people did not want to be caught in the middle of the night and question about this and that. So over time, it was similar to a curfew. Bane poked his head out of the darkness of the alley and glanced at the patrolling soldiers who had just left. Bane had roughly figured out the patrol route. Bane began to move toward the Imperial Palace. Dressed in black, he completely blended into the darkness and moved forward quickly. Sometimes he was like a black shadow passing through the alley, and sometimes he was like a low-flying swallow flying over the eaves. At this moment, Bane perfectly displayed his excellent qualities as a thief. His movements were agile, silent, low-key, and fast. From the alley to the Imperial Palace, Bane perfectly avoided everyone's sight. Only a dog, when Bane passed over its head, raised its head in confusion and then lay down again. Bane quickly passed through the alley, and then like an arrow leaving the bow, he jumped to the Imperial Palace's moat. Without the slightest pause, Bane cleanly plunged into the moat. Moreover, there was no sound of heavy objects entering the water. When Bane entered the water, he first held his breath, and then waited for his ears and eyes to adjust before he carefully tried to take a small breath in the water. After feeling that he could breathe normally in the water, Bane let out a sigh of relief. This route to sneak into the Imperial Palace was determined by Aisha and him. Sneak into the Imperial Palace from the moat through the Imperial Palace's drain. And the premise of this action was Aisha's secret witch potion that could let people breathe in the water and enter the water silently. It was said that Bane was the first person to try it, which made Bane worried for a while. But fortunately, it was effective. Bane slowly swam in the water. After swimming for a while, he saw the drain that Aisha mentioned. Although the drain was hidden under the moat, it was still blocked by stone railings that were as thick as an adult's arm. Although the gap between the stone railings was not small, it was still not something that an adult like Bane could enter. Bane looked at the fence and took out an amethyst hidden in his arms. Bane rubbed the very smooth surface of the amethyst and then put it on the stone railings. A teleportation portal appeared in front of Bane. This was a small, short-distance teleportation portal that Aisha had specially made and could be sealed in the amethyst. This small teleportation portal could at most go through the distance of a wall. Although it was not very useful, going through the fence was not a problem. Bane entered the teleportation portal. When he reappeared in the water, the fence was already behind him. From now on, Bane had entered the Imperial Palace of the Middle Empire. Chapter 123. The Imperial Palace was the foundation of the Middle Empire. It was also the residence and face of the royal family. Therefore, there was no need to mention the extravagance and grandeur of the palace. Even the facilities needed for daily life were built very well. For example, the intricate drainage channels under the palace. Bane slowly moved forward in the Imperial Palace's sewers. He could not see the end of the sewers, and there was a fork in the road every 4 to 5 meters. Bane felt like he was in a huge underground maze, and he couldn't find an exit for a while. Bane's heart was filled with fear. If he hadn't taken the secret medicine Aisha had given him, he would have drowned in the sewers of the palace. Bane thanked Sister Aisha again. He started to feel the direction of the water flow. Based on the time, it should be time, Aisha said as she fiddled with her fingers. Yes. Staya was using a white linen cloth to wipe the shield of oath that she had not used for a long time. If everything goes well, and the item you gave me is useful. You little girl, who are you looking down on? Aisha was furious. Witches' creations are recognized by the world as the best. First of all, that was 100 years ago, Staya said. Second of all, witches' creations are recognized by the world as unreliable and deceitful. Nonsense. A devout knight does not speak without reason. That's enough, Jilin said as he reclined on the stool. At the same time, on Jilin's slightly raised palm, a small flame was swimming back and forth, like a fire spirit, dancing gracefully on his palm. Staya and Aisha looked at each other. They both felt that it was strange. Even though they had known each other for a long time, they had never seen Jilin, a fire dragon, play with fire like this before. To be honest, what do you think are the chances of Bane succeeding? Staya said, let alone him. Even I don't have the slightest chance of success. Aisha snorted, but it's hard to say. After all, Bane is a professional thief with great skills. He should be better than me in this aspect. Maybe he can do what I can't. What are the chances of him coming back safely if he fails? Staya asked. That depends on the situation. Aisha said, if Bane knows that it's hopeless and gives up and no one finds out, then he has an 80% chance of coming back. But if he is found out and escapes, then I'm afraid it's impossible. What about you? Staya looked at Jilin. If he really falls into the hands of the Middle Empire, are you really not going to save him? The flame in Jilin's hand suddenly grew bigger. It instantly suppressed all the lights in the room. All the decorations on the windows started burning at the same time. It's his own choice, Jilin said calmly. The fire on the decorations suddenly extinguished. There was not even a wisp of smoke. Aisha and Staya looked at each other again. It was the first time they saw Jilin make a mistake when playing with fire. But like I said before, humans don't turn back until they see the south wall. But there are two types of humans. One is those who turn back when they see the south wall, and the other is those who still charge forward when they see the south wall. I'm not sure if Bane is that type, Jilin said faintly. In the Imperial Garden of the Royal Palace. The Imperial Garden was known as the best garden in the world. There were countless rare beasts and rare plants inside. The Imperial Garden at night was even more tranquil and beautiful. When the summer night breeze blew past the countless rustling branches and leaves, it was enough to make people feel so comfortable that they forgot about everything else. It was as if one was lost in the world and felt like they were alone in the world. In addition, there was a winding Udai river in the garden. The clear river water flowed slowly. It made one feel relaxed and happy, until a hand suddenly reached out from the water and grabbed onto a rock on the riverbank. Bane carefully peeked out and looked around. When he realized that there was no one around, Bane instantly felt very lucky. He made a prompt decision. Like a cat, he agilely flipped onto the riverbank. He rushed into the forest beside the Udai River in 2 steps. He picked the most luxuriant tree in sight and climbed up. Then, he collapsed on the tree branch and took a few deep breaths. Although he could breathe in the water, for some reason, Bane didn't dare to take deep breaths. When he caught his breath, Bane lowered his body and lay on the tree branch. He gently pushed aside the leaves in front of him and looked through the gap. He looked toward the largest palace in the Imperial Palace. Even though Bane didn't read many books, when he saw the huge palace in front of him, he couldn't help but think of the word magnificent in his heart. There were countless palaces. Every one of them was exquisite and gorgeous. Every single one of them was unique. Even the inconspicuous ridged beasts on the roof of the palace were carved vividly. Although there were many palaces, in Bane's eyes, they didn't seem messy at all. No, not only did they not seem messy, They were so orderly that they were crazy, because the entire palace was symmetrical with the road as the center line. Not to mention the number of palaces on the left and right, even the shape of the palaces and the number of trees in the courtyard were the same. Was this the most powerful empire of the human race? Bane thought to himself. Bane saw the path clearly and slowly retreated from the tree. He activated the thief's godly skill, stealth. From now on, his movements had to be slow and gentle. He couldn't have the slightest sense of urgency. Otherwise, there would be a risk of failure. The Imperial Palace couldn't be compared to the Duke's mansion. It could allow Bane to run around without being discovered. Bane prayed in his heart that he could smoothly steal the Imperial Jade Seal. Although praying to the gods wasn't a habit of thieves, and under normal circumstances, no gods would bless thieves. However, Bane felt that this time was different. After all, he wasn't stealing for himself. He was risking his life to steal for the sake of nearly 20 princes of this country and thousands of innocent lives that might be sacrificed. If the gods knew about this, they would definitely be greatly gratified and bless him. Bane encouraged himself in his heart as he walked toward the tallest palace. Looking for the right time, he walked through the corridor and perfectly missed the patrolling guards. He easily opened a window, jumped in, and passed through the house. Using the dense forest vegetation and the rockery as cover, he was like a butcher dismembering an ox. He weaved back and forth between the countless patrolling teams with ease. Bane approached the core area of the palace complex without any mishaps. Bane was lying on top of the eaves of the palace, hiding in the shadow of the eaves. Bane, who was hiding behind the eaves, only revealed one eye to check the situation here. With just a cursory glance, Bane's heart tightened. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva, thinking that the so-called watertight and impregnable was just like this. Now, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to take another step forward. However, after all, he had come so far. Bane really didn't want to give up. He decided to wait here until the guards changed shifts. He hoped that there would be an opportunity to take advantage of. Just like that, Bane lay there motionlessly for 4 hours. During this time, the guards did change shifts once. However, it was impregnable. Bane thought to himself, "Do you know that I am here to save your princes? If you don't want your princes to die, then be smart and give me a chance." Bane's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Now, as long as he looked at the square full of guards, he would feel a mountain-like pressure pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. Bane suddenly felt that he was very stupid. How could he be so impulsive? He didn't know those princes anyway. If Jilin wanted to kill them, then he could. If he died, then so be it. What did it have to do with him? Why did I step forward in the heat of the moment? Stee should be the one to do such a heroic act for others without any regard for her own safety. Bane didn't think that he was at this level. This was crazy. It seemed that he was always with Staya and always listened to her talk about worrying about the world first. He was infected by her. It seemed that the ability of the Church of Light to infect people was not to be underestimated. He had to be more careful in the future. It was too weird this time. However, even though that was the case, if Bane had to watch a few thousand people die, and he could clearly do something, but he didn't do anything, he really couldn't bear it. Thinking of this, Bane once again glanced at the other side's tightly packed guards. No matter what, he couldn't pass through, no matter how unwilling he was. Just when Bane had made up his mind and decided to retreat first, and had already started to crawl back, a gentle voice suddenly sounded behind Bane. "Sir, do you think the guards in our country's palace are well guarded?" Bane was so shocked that his soul almost left his body. He threw a dagger behind him without thinking. He didn't even turn his head back. He nimbly jumped down the stairs and ran away. As early as Bane came here, he had already thought of a way out. "Sir, you must be joking. This is our country's palace after all. It's not a place for you to come and go as you please." Bane's body suddenly froze, and he couldn't move. He felt as if there was an incomparably sharp sword pressed against his back. As long as he moved slightly, he would lose his life. "Sir, you can enter the palace in the middle of the night, sneak here, and do something that has never happened in hundreds of years. You are indeed a hero. If it wasn't because of the situation, I would definitely be willing to be friends with you. Please do me the honor and turn around. Bane didn't dare to disobey. He could only turn around and look at the person standing on the roof. He saw that person's long hair fluttering in the wind. His white robe fluttered, and he stood with a long sword in his hand. Under the moonlight, he really had the elegant demeanor of an immortal who stood aloof from the world. "It's you." Bane saw the person in front of him clearly and knew that he couldn't escape no matter what. "Ah, so it's you," Guy Mingwes said with a light smile, but her smile was full of meaning. Chapter 124. Greetings, Sir Sword Saint, Bane respectfully bowed. In the eyes of a normal person like Bane, a legend-rank combatant was no different from a celestial being. Even if Bane had personally witnessed these legend-rank combatants being beaten by Ji-Lin to the point where they couldn't even retaliate, it was still the same. Now that he had been caught red-handed, Bane no longer had any thoughts of running away and could only resign himself to fate. He said to the Sword Saint, "I didn't think that Sir Sword Saint would still remember such an insignificant person like me. I'm truly honored. Young man who followed the Red Disaster. As long as they saw you that day and survived, I'm sure no one would forget your appearance," Guy Mingwes said. "What's your name?" Bane replied. "But Sir Sword Saint is truly amazing. Even with my current appearance, Sir Sword Saint was still able to recognize me at a glance." Bane was currently still wearing the appearance of a person from the Middle Empire who had been disguised by Isha. "My body is like a sword. My sword heart is clear. I can pierce through all falsehoods," Sword Saint said. "When did Sir Sword Saint discover this brat?" Bane asked. "From the moment you jumped into the moat," Sword Saint said. "Originally, I was practicing my swordsmanship near the water, but I suddenly felt something strange in the water, so I casually looked around. Who would have thought that I would find a thief like you? With my meager abilities, it's not an injustice for me to fall into the hands of Sir Sword Saint," Bane said. No, you don't need to be humble," Sword Saint smiled. "If I didn't happen to be here today, perhaps you really would have entered the palace for nothing and returned safely. To be able to move around the inner palace like there's no one around and not rely on your cultivation base. Young man, your movement technique is also very beautiful." "Lord Sword Saint, you flatter me. I'm not worthy of your praise." Bane chuckled, imitating the way the third prince spoke. "I can accept it. Looking at the young man's figure in this palace, even this old man can't help but yearn for it. I can't help but think, if 2 years ago I was able to sneak in like this young man without alerting anyone, perhaps I really could have taken the Emperor's head," Sword Saint said as he looked at the tallest palace. Bane doubted what he had heard. The Sword Saint wanted to kill the Emperor? Since Sir Sword Saint wants to kill the Emperor, then it seems that this humble one is very fortunate to meet Sir Sword Saint tonight. It must be the will of the heavens. Although insignificant, this humble one is willing to help Sir Sword Saint and help Sir Sword Saint behead the Emperor, Bane quickly said. Haha, Sword Saint was stunned by Bane's words. After a while, he recovered and laughed. Bane suddenly became nervous. He didn't know if he had said something wrong, or if there was something wrong with this legendary expert. Not bad. Sword Saint suddenly stopped laughing and praised Bane loudly. At such a young age, you actually dared to break into the palace alone. You could be considered brave. From the Imperial Garden to here, you walked all the way without alerting anyone. Your movements are nimble, and your thoughts are meticulous. When you saw the tight security, you waited patiently for 4 hours. Your patience and perseverance are top-notch, and your temperament is calm. Then, when you saw that things were not going well, you decisively left. You could be considered to be able to pick up and let go. Finally, when you met me, you were actually able to respond appropriately. You didn't run away in a panic, and you were able to see the situation clearly. You could be considered to be a talent with potential. It's a pity that you took the wrong path. Sir Sword Saint is right. What else could Bane say? Follow me. Sword Saint floated down from the roof and said with a smile. Bane nodded. Now that he was at the mercy of others, he had no choice but to follow whatever they said. Thus, under the gaze of countless guards, Bane followed behind Sword Saint and passed through the square that he didn't even dare to try before. After bypassing the tallest hall, Bane followed Sword Saint to a palace that was still brightly lit. This was the Emperor's imperial study. Li Zhong, I brought someone for you. The Sword Saint walked to the door of the imperial study and pushed it open without knocking. He even called out the Emperor's name. Bane's eyes widened as he thought to himself that this was really something. The guards in charge of the imperial study looked straight ahead, pretending that they didn't see or hear anything that just happened. Who is it? The Emperor didn't even raise his head as he continued to read through the memorials. As the Emperor, he always had an endless amount of memorials to read. Greetings, Your Majesty the Emperor of the Middle Empire. Bane cupped his fist and bowed to the Emperor under Sword Saint's signal. The Emperor only raised his head when he saw that the person didn't kneel. Who is this? The Emperor looked at Sword Saint and asked. Sword Saint reached out and lightly tapped Bane's ear. Aisha's disguise immediately lost its effect. Bane returned to his original appearance. This isn't a citizen of our country. Where did you find him? The Emperor asked curiously. I didn't find him, Sword Saint said. This young man snuck into the palace to steal. Steal? The Emperor put down the pen in his hand and roared with his eyes wide open. This is really a time of chaos. The country is in turmoil. Demons and monsters are fighting to come out. How many years has it been since there was a thief in the imperial palace? I'm afraid it's been a few hundred years. More or less, Sword Saint said. Then what are we waiting for? The Emperor slammed the table. Men, drag this thief out and behead him. Hang his head on the wall for 3 days as the world ring. Furthermore, all guards of the imperial palace today, from commander to commander, will be fined 3 months of salary and 20 strokes of a cane. The Emperor was furious. The soldiers waiting outside quickly came in to drag Bane out and execute him on the spot. But when he saw the Sword Saint raise his hand, he hurriedly retreated back the way he came. What are you doing? The Emperor asked. This person can't be killed so easily, Sword Saint said. What? Stealing from the imperial palace is a serious crime, punishable by 9 familial exterminations. Did this Emperor accuse him wrongly? The Emperor asked. This person is the young man who followed the Red Calamity, Sword Saint said. The Emperor scowled. Seeing the Emperor's expression, Sword Saint knew that he couldn't remember this, but then again, everyone's attention was focused on the Red Calamity. What little attention they had left was also split between the other two, so who would be able to keep an eye on this normal-looking young man? The Red Calamity walks the world. There are a total of 4 of them. The Red Calamity. The Simai Empire's Princess Staya, the Witch of the Extreme Night Aisha, and this young man. Sword Saint said. Really? The Emperor asked. Of course. Bane thought to himself, how come the 3 of them have such impressive nicknames, but I don't even have a name? Summon the Prime Minister and the Western Marshal to the Imperial Palace, the Emperor said excitedly. The authority of the Emperor in the Middle Empire couldn't be underestimated. His words carried enormous weight, and his words were the law. So as a subject, he naturally didn't have much human rights. Although it was already late at night, Qin Lan and Zhuge Zhang quickly arrived at the imperial study. Grand Marshal Qin commanded the 3 armies and had a high realm. Although he hurried over, he was still full of energy and looked valiant. Unfortunately for Prime Minister Zhuge, he looked like he was already asleep, but then he got up and hurried over, looking a bit dispirited. This is... Qin Lan looked at Bane and said. The Emperor was about to speak, but Sword Saint spoke first. This is a hero that only appears once every few hundred years. Sword Saint said. Wow, Qin Lan exclaimed. To be praised by Master like that at such a young age, you're really something. Where did you come from? Qin Lan had never seen Sword Saint praise someone like that before, so she hurriedly asked. A thief who came to the imperial palace to steal things. Sword Saint smiled. Stop joking around. Hurry up and tell me what happened. The Emperor was a bit impatient. Sword Saint didn't argue with the Emperor like he usually did, and seriously told him everything. Qin Lan and Prime Minister were both shocked. Young man, you're a human. Why are you helping a villain and bullying your own kind? Prime Minister pondered for a bit before asking. Who's helping a villain and bullying my own kind? Bane was immediately displeased, as if this Prime Minister was calling him a traitor a despicable person. Could it be that you were forced? Prime Minister said. Was it that evil dragon who forced you to be his slave? Of course not. Bane shouted. I owe Lin a debt of gratitude. He saved the lives of my fellow villagers and myself from the wolf pack. That's why I followed him. The Emperor and Prime Minister looked at each other. Ahem. Let's not talk about why you followed that evil dragon for now. Prime Minister coughed and said, Let me ask you, just now Sword Saint said that you came to the Imperial Palace to steal. Is that right? Yes. Bane admitted to this point. Then what did you come to steal? Prime Minister said. Bane immediately shut his mouth and didn't say anything else. He didn't want to say another word. He was afraid that if the Emperor knew that he came to steal the Imperial Jade Seal, he wouldn't be able to control himself and would personally chop him to death. According to the third prince, his father's realm wasn't low in the small courtyard. Crimson Unicorn and the other two had been waiting here for 4 to 6 hours. Stee's shield had been polished for 2 to 3 hours and had long since been polished until it shone brightly. However, Stee's hand still didn't stop. Aisha also took out a purple crystal from her seat and played with it. The flame in Jilin's hand was still dancing like a dragon and a phoenix. Kacha! Suddenly, an extremely soft sound of glass shattering was heard. Although the sound was extremely soft, it was like a silver needle falling to the ground. But when it landed in the ears of the 3 people in the house, it was no different from a clap of thunder. The 3 of them all looked at the crystal in Aisha's hand. As expected, there was a crack as thin as a cow's hair on the crystal. This is... Staya asked. Bane failed. It seems like he has already fallen into someone else's hands. Aisha said. Also, my disguise technique was broken by someone. Then is Bane still alive? Staya asked. You should be fine. Aisha glanced at Xiaohei, who was standing on a branch. Interesting. Jilin suddenly laughed. But his laughter was extremely deep, and it seemed to contain endless wind and rain, fire and thunder. A storm was coming. Chapter 125. What do you want to do? Staya saw Jilin smile and had a bad feeling. Although she did not know exactly what Jilin wanted to do, Staya was confident that she could guess it. Bane didn't let you save him before he left. That's right, Jilin said. But I said that humans are fickle. Bane's previous thoughts might not be his current thoughts. Maybe he's being tortured in the cage and is waiting for me to save him. It's only been a few hours. How could it change so quickly? Staya said. It only takes a few words to change a human's thoughts in the blink of an eye, Jilin said. Bane went to the palace this time with great faith. He went for the sake of the innocent lives that might be sacrificed. If you go on a killing spree in order to save him, wouldn't you be wasting Bane's efforts? If that's the case, he won't be happy even if you save him, Staya said passionately. No, Bane is not you. Jilin thought for a moment and shook his head. Bane is different from you. He doesn't have something called faith like you. He doesn't disregard his own safety when he's in the enemy's hands and only think of turning the enemy against him for the sake of the world. If it was him, he would have regretted it the moment he was in the enemy's hands. Staya instantly recalled every detail of Bane's life. She realized that she was speechless. Fine, she admitted that Jilin was right. You two don't panic, Aisha said. Bane will be fine for a while. Why do you say that? Jilin said. Since my disguise was broken, then the enemy must have recognized Bane's identity. No one would waste such a huge chess piece. We just need to wait for them to make their move, Aisha said. The art of war of the Middle Empire says that if the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. What an idiot. Jilin snorted angrily. If he had the time to wait for others to make the first move, he might as well go to the palace and burn it down himself. Where are you going? Staya blocked in front of Jilin with her shield. You want to stop me? Jilin asked. If you go, all lives will be lost. This is not what Bane wants, Staya said harshly. You once taught me a word. I think you seem to have forgotten it, Jilin said. What? Staya asked. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. I've also taught you that death is inevitable. It can be as heavy as Mount Tai or as light as a goose feather. It's all different. You mean to say that if I want to leave, I have to kill you first? Yes. I don't think so. You can try. Okay. But do you want to wear a helmet? No need. It doesn't matter if I wear it or not. Okay. Jilin took a step forward and instantly moved behind Staya. Staya was a master of the world after all. She managed to react and turn around with Jilin. However, when Staya turned around, she saw Jilin in a proper fist stance. Jilin bowed, stepped forward, and threw out a fist. The fist was powerful and majestic. It was like Mount Tai was pressing down and thousands of riders were charging forward. It was the fist intent of the king of fighters, Musin. Dong! Jilin's fist landed squarely on the shield of victory. Staya flew out like a cannonball. She knocked away all the chairs in the house, broke the long table in the middle of the house, and smashed through 2 walls. In the end, she crashed into the river behind the small courtyard with a loud boom. The water splashed and overturned 2 boats nearby. Countless passers-by were shocked. "You've learned fist techniques?" Aisha said in surprise. "Human things are quite useful sometimes." Jilin made a fist stance. "But it's still not as good as Musin's," Aisha said. "There's no matching cultivation method. There's only a fist stance. It's only similar in appearance. Moreover, this is just a clone. It's still inconvenient to use it," Jilin said. "And you held back," Aisha said. "Of course," Jilin said impatiently. "Let's go and find Bane. This little mantis won't be able to come up for a while." Aisha was helpless. She was about to follow Jilin to the palace to find Bane when she saw Jilin suddenly stop moving. "What's wrong?" Aisha asked. "It seems like we really have to think about it at length," Jilin said. "Huh." Aisha was wondering why Jilin suddenly changed his mind, but she understood the next moment. "Brother Long," the 3rd prince walked in. "Please forgive me for visiting so late at night." "Hey, what's wrong with this house?" The 3rd prince saw the mess in the house and the big hole created by Staya the moment he entered. "Nothing," Aisha said. "He insisted on building another door himself. See, he failed." "Huh?" The 3rd prince was puzzled. "There's already a door in the south, but Brother Long wants to open another door in the north. What's going on? I've never heard of such a thing. What are you doing here so late at night?" Aisha decisively changed the topic. She had only heard of the layout of houses and feng shui. Jilin was definitely not as good as her. If the 3rd young master wanted to talk about this, there was really no way to talk about it. "Oh, to be honest," the 3rd prince remembered that he had something important to do. "I recently heard that my brothers are going to be transferred back from outside." "Oh?" "As far as I know, most of the princes hold important positions. It's not that easy to transfer them back," Aisha said. "Sister is right. It's like that," the 3rd prince said as if he was sad. "It's just that a few days ago, my 7th brother unfortunately passed away. My uncle and the emperor speculated that it was the Red Calamity. You all know about the Red Calamity, right? It's the fire dragon that caused a lot of trouble in the north and took away the entire dwarf race." I know. Jilin nodded. "It's good that you know," the 3rd prince said. "His Majesty was worried about the safety of my other brothers, so he ordered them to return to the capital. What does this have to do with me?" When Jilin heard the 3rd prince mention this, he thought that the 3rd prince already knew that he was the one who killed the 7th princes. Was he here to provoke him? "Isn't this—" The 3rd prince seemed to find it difficult to speak. "Seeing that my big brother and 2nd brother are about to return, I would like to ask Brother Long and my 2 sisters, as well as that other little brother, to help me come up with a plan. I would like to confirm the matter between me and big sister Xueqing before my 2 brothers return, so as to avoid unnecessary complications." "Haha." Aisha laughed. "I really didn't expect that as a prince, the 3rd prince, you still have the leisure to do this when the Middle Empire is facing a great enemy and an unprecedented crisis. Look at what you're saying. Even if the sky is going to fall tomorrow, I still have to eat today, right?" The 3rd prince rubbed his hands together and said with a flattering smile. He didn't look like a prince at all. Instead, he looked more like a drunken street scoundrel. "Be serious. Look at how useless you are. No wonder Xueqing doesn't like you." Aisha shouted. "Yes." 3rd young master's face seemed to have changed in an instant. He became stern and stern, his expression cold. "You're right, sister. I was too rash." However, Jilin became more and more entranced as he looked at the 3rd prince's serious face. "Brother Long, what's wrong?" The third prince asked. Nothing. I just feel that your face is a little familiar, Jilin said. Ha! The third prince laughed dryly. He thought to himself, what are you talking about? I've been running over to your place every few days. No matter what, we're already acquaintances. What do you mean by familiar? I feel that you look very similar to someone, Jilin said. Is that so? The third prince was a little confused. He thought to himself, I have more than 30 brothers and sisters, and all of them look alike. I just don't know which one you're talking about. You said that you have an uncle? Jilin seemed to have remembered something. Yes. Who's your uncle? My uncle, Gai Mingwe. HM? Yes, Lord Sword Saint of the Middle Empire. Huh, so that's how it is. Jilin laughed eerily. So you're the descendant of the person holding the sword. No wonder you look familiar. Why? Could it be that Brother Long and my uncle have met before? Not only have they met before, could it be that Brother Long and my uncle have some sort of relationship? That's not it. Then what's the relationship between Brother Long and my uncle? It's nothing, but he once cut off one of my arms. The third prince was dumbfounded. Then he calmed himself down and looked at Jilin's intact arms. He laughed and said, Ha, Brother Long, don't joke with me. Jilin also smiled. He walked in front of the third prince and grabbed his collar. With a gentle lift, the third prince's feet left the ground. Do I look like I'm joking with you? Your Excellency, please let go of the third prince. A man in black walked out from the darkness with a long sword. Otherwise, don't blame me for not showing mercy. The Imperial Palace Shadow Guard, a disciple of Sword Mountain. They were sent by the Emperor and Sword Saint to protect the third prince. Jilin smiled disdainfully and waved his hand. The third prince flew out through the hole that Staya had made. After a few seconds, there was the sound of something heavy falling into the water. The third prince doesn't know how to swim. You execute the thief on the spot. I'll go save the third prince. The Shadow Guard hurriedly said. Okay. With a clang, the disciple of Sword Mountain pulled out his long sword and stabbed straight at Jilin. It was his strongest move, the personal sword technique of the Sword Saint, sky-piercing sword. After the Shadow Guard finished speaking, he instantly disappeared with a whoosh. It could be seen how fast he was and how anxious he was to save the third prince. Jilin's feet moved slightly, and he actually moved a few meters away. He clenched his fist and punched. It was still the fist technique of the King of Fighters. Although it was upright, there was nothing special about it. Although Jilin was swinging his fist at Kong Chu, a dull thud could be heard. The Shadow Guard was already lying on the ground, no longer moving. Jilin casually grabbed the sword of the Sword Mountain disciple and said, Don't worry, he won't die. Chapter 126. The Sword Mountain disciple couldn't believe what he was seeing. What was this? He was the personal disciple of the Sword Saint, a famous sword genius in the Middle Empire, and now he had reached the threshold of the 9th level. But the sword that he had stabbed with all his strength was caught in someone's bare hands. What a joke. Of course, the Sword Mountain disciple wouldn't admit defeat. He wanted to turn the sword around and directly cut off Jilin's entire hand. Poor thing. Aisha couldn't help but shake her head and sigh when she saw the Sword Mountain disciple's reaction. His sword that he had used all his strength with was easily caught in the palm of someone else's hand, let alone now that he was under someone else's control. How could he do anything to his opponent? In Aisha's opinion, if this Sword Mountain disciple wasn't an idiot, then he must have lost his mind sure enough. No matter how hard the Sword Mountain disciple tried, the long sword in his hand didn't move at all. Your sword isn't good enough. Try another one, Jilin said. Then, he used his other hand to lightly flick the sword. The long sword immediately broke. The Sword Mountain disciple didn't even have time to react when his sword was destroyed. His mind was already severely injured. He spat out a mouthful of blood at Jilin and fell to the ground. His breathing was weak, and he looked like he only had half a breath left. Jilin took a step forward in an instant, punched out, grabbed the sword, and flicked out a finger. He defeated the Shadow Guard and the Sword Mountain disciple in the blink of an eye. He even waved his hand to evaporate the blood that the Sword Mountain disciple spat out, so it wouldn't splash on him. Then, with the demeanor of a grandmaster, he dusted off the non-existent dust on his body and turned around. Staya, whose clothes were still dripping wet, carried the third prince back through the hole that he had made. You almost drowned him, Staya said. I believe you, Jilin said. He won't drown with you here. What do you want? Staya asked. Nothing. Jilin shrugged. His uncle once chopped off one of my arms. I'm just taking a little revenge. A little revenge? Staya poked at the third prince's broken legs. If his head had entered the water first, he wouldn't have drowned. He would have fallen to his death. Can a person die after falling into the water? Jilin said incredulously. You underestimate the fragility of ordinary humans, Aisha said. Jilin saw Aisha's serious face and hurriedly ran to the third prince's side to look him up and down. After discovering that only the third prince's legs were broken, he was relieved. He said to Staya, Cure him. I still want to exchange him for Bane. You want to use the third prince as a hostage to threaten the emperor? Staya said, What do you think? As you wish, no lives will be lost, and you can exchange for Bane's return. It's the best of both worlds, Jilin said. I didn't think that a dragon like you could come up with such a plan. Staya felt that Jilin had learned how shameless humans were. Isn't that a good idea? Aisha said, We can't just watch Bane fall into the enemy's hands and not save him, right? Holding the prince hostage is a very feasible plan. Staya thought about it seriously. Although it was a little despicable, it was still better than Jilin breaking into the royal palace and killing everyone. Staya raised her hand, and the sacred book of light appeared. The book flipped open automatically. It quickly flipped through the pages and stopped at a certain page. Believe in God. The light of God will heal all the pain of the world. A few lines of golden words appeared on the blank page. The sacred book of light started to shine with a blinding white light. This was the great healing spell that could revive the dead. The effect of the great healing spell was extraordinary. Soon, the Shadow Guard and the disciple of the Sword Mountain who were lying on the ground slowly woke up. He was a spy specially trained by the royal family, so his basic knowledge was very strong. He had just woken up, but he could instantly determine the current situation. Seeing that the third prince was lying not far away from him, and that powerful man didn't even look at him, the Shadow Guard didn't say anything and turned into a black shadow and floated towards the royal palace. Seeing that the Shadow Guard was running away, Jilin didn't do anything. He didn't have any intention of stopping him. It was like a human killing a mosquito. If he didn't kill it, then let it fly. Was he going to chase him all day? That didn't make sense. On the other hand, the disciple of the Sword Mountain didn't run away, nor did he worry about the person he was protecting, the third prince. Instead, he sat on the ground and held his broken sword in a daze. The swordsmen of the Middle Empire cultivated the sword wholeheartedly. Although the sword was still there, if the sword was broken, then this person was likely to be unable to recover. Of course, if there was a cultivation base like the Sword Saint, then there was naturally an exception. However, although he didn't run away, Jilin didn't want this person to sit here and be an eyesore. Jilin reached out and picked up the person. Go and tell the emperor that the third prince is in my hands. Tomorrow evening, I will go and find him to exchange for Bane. Tell him to prepare Bane and the Imperial Jade Seal. Jilin said, Prepare what? The disciple of the Sword Mountain was shocked by Jilin's words. Even the disciple of the Sword Mountain who didn't care about worldly affairs and focused on swordsmanship felt that this was too shocking. Bane, the Imperial Jade Seal, let's go. Jilin impatiently repeated again and threw the person out of the door. What are you doing? Aisha said. You purposely reminded them to be prepared and gave them the initiative. The moment Bane was caught, we lost the initiative, Staya said. But we have the third prince in our hands now. How can you say we lost the initiative? Aisha retorted. The emperor of the Middle Empire has more than 30 children. Even if other countries want to collect information, they have to choose the important ones first. Losing one or two princes is normal in the eyes of the emperor of the Middle Empire. Don't think that you can make the Golden King listen to you just because you have the third prince. Do you think this is our home? Staya said disdainfully. No matter what, he can't watch his son be killed by an outsider, Aisha said. You want to kill the third prince? Staya said in a deep voice. He's our friend in the Middle Empire. You can kill him just because you want to? Do you have any humanity? Ha! Aisha sneered. If it's necessary, no one can't be sacrificed. Not to mention he's just a stranger. Wait, Jilin suddenly said. Staya and Aisha shouted at the same time. What's the initiative you're talking about? Jilin asked. Staya and Aisha exchanged glances. The more they looked at each other, the angrier they got. Why didn't you teach him? Staya couldn't hold it in. Didn't he learn the human language from you? Why didn't you teach him before? Staya said. Jilin looked at the two who were about to start arguing again. He felt that if he didn't do anything, the two of them would probably forget who Bane was. Actually, our previous arrangements were only possible under the premise that others didn't know who we were. Now that Bane was recognized, the Middle Empire knows who we are. Then, no matter if we kill the other princes or use Shueching to make the third prince rebel, all our previous plans will go down the drain. But it's not a big deal. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. No matter what, humans are very special animals. In this world, there are many animals that are smarter than humans, but none of them are more complicated than humans. So I want to try. I want to see if I can use my brain to play with humans, just like those wise men in human history. But now it seems like I've lost completely. Although I'm much smarter than humans, I'm much worse than humans when it comes to scheming. Therefore, if I want to get the Imperial Jade Seal, the only way left is to take it by force, right? Aisha. Jilin looked at the third prince and said. Aisha nodded. That was indeed the case. Now that they had the third prince and the other side had Bane, both sides had already drawn their swords and spears, so they could only fight fair and square. There was no other way to take advantage of this. If that's the case, we'll have to fight either way. Let's let them be prepared and fight without regrets, Jilin said. After all, this might be the last battle of their lives. I don't want them to die without knowing why. Do you have to make it sound so righteous? They might not even want to fight with you, Aisha said with a look of disdain. Then give me Bane and the Imperial Jade Seal. Jilin said, I've already spent so much effort to set up such a high platform for the humans to get the third prince. If they still don't know how to appreciate my kindness, then don't blame me. This is their last chance. Jilin looked at the human palace that stood tall in the dark night, flames burning in his eyes. At this moment, he was like a majestic god. The gods had never placed humans in their eyes, but they could inadvertently decide the fate of countless people. No wonder humans always said that fate was unpredictable, and the heavens were playing with them. It should be so. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.